Ever find yourself, like, stuck in traffic, staring at the sea of brake lights and just wishing, oof, if only there were no problems, you know? Like, wouldn't it be amazing to have that perfectly organized life, an empty inbox, laundry that folds itself, a commute that's actually enjoyable?
I think we've all been there.
Right. But here's the thing. What if we actually got what we wished for? Would a world without any problems actually make us happier?
That's a really interesting question.
It is. And that's exactly what we're diving into today with Mario Boomer's novel, LNZ, Refugio ante la Obscuridad. It's like he took this universal fantasy, this idea of a perfect world, and then really picked it apart, asking, okay, but what would that actually look like? And more importantly, how would it make us feel?
And he does it in a way that's both thought-provoking and, at times, surprisingly funny.
Totally. Okay, so full disclosure, the novel's originally in Spanish, but we've gone through and pulled out some really compelling excerpts to give us this, like, core understanding of Boomer's premise. And trust me, it's a wild ride. So instead of just telling one story, Boomer weaves together these multiple narratives that all kind of converge around this idea of a problem-free world.
It's a really clever way to explore how different people might react to such a radical shift in reality.
Exactly. It's almost like he's running a giant social experiment, right?
Pretty.
It's like, okay, let's take a bunch of different people with their own quirks, their own baggage, and drop them into this utopia. What happens?
And that's where the real depth of the novel lies, I think, in its exploration of human nature. It's not just a fantastical what-if scenario. It's a deep dive into the complexities of desire, happiness, and, yeah, even the beauty of our flawed, often messy existence.
I love that, the beauty of our flawed existence, because that's what makes us human, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so to give you a taste of what I'm talking about, Boomer introduces us to these incredibly relatable characters, right? And even before their world gets turned upside down, they're already yearning for this, like, idealized version of life.
Right, they're already seeking that elusive perfection.
Yeah. Like, take Gustavo, for example. He's on vacation in Acapulco with his fiancée, Martha.
Yeah.
You'd think paradise would be the perfect escape, right?
Right, what more could you ask for?
Exactly. Sun, sand, margaritas. But Boomer gives us this hilarious scene where Gustavo's on the beach complaining about the sun, the sand getting everywhere, even the texture of his sunscreen. It's like, come on, dude, you're in Acapulco.
It's so relatable, though, right?
Totally. It's
Yeah.
that classic human tendency to focus on the little annoyances even when we're in paradise. And here's the thing. Gustavo's not alone. Boomer introduces us to Sammy, a guy in Miami Beach who's nursing a broken heart and a nasty sea urchin sting.
Ouch.
Yeah, talk about adding insult to injury, right?
Well,
Anyway, Sammy's world feels like it's falling apart. His
Yeah.
wife left him. He's questioning everything, career, purpose, the whole nine yards. And what's so interesting is that both Gustavo and Sammy, despite being worlds apart, are already longing for that problem-free life. They're looking for an escape, a quick fix to their very human struggles.
And it's that yearning, that desire for a world without pain or disappointment that sets the stage for the novel's central event. A massive,
Cool.
totally inexplicable wave that hits both Acapulco and Miami Beach at the exact same time.
And we're not talking about your average tsunami here. This wave is like a force of nature, a cosmic reset button that seems to rewrite reality itself.
Exactly. It's like a catalyst, a point of no return. It propels the characters and seemingly the entire world into this alternate reality. And guess what? This new reality is exactly what they wished for. No disease, no pain, perfect weather every single day, food is abundant, everyone's in peak physical condition, and relationships effortless. No more arguments, no more jealousy, not even a hint of conflict.
They even took the danger out of the ocean. Sharks, stingrays, all those creatures that used to send shivers down our spines are now, like, harmless, even cuddly. Imagine that.
It's like Boomer took every single fear, every inconvenience, and just erased it from existence. He paints this incredibly vivid picture of a world that's been meticulously designed to eliminate any source of discomfort.
Okay, so it sounds pretty dreamy on the surface, right? No more worries, no more heartbreaks, just pure, unadulterated bliss. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, Boomer doesn't let us off that easily.
Right, there's always a catch.
Always. While most people in this new world seem to adapt without missing a beat, Gustavo and Sammy, well, they start to feel a little off.
It's like that saying, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. You don't always get what you think you want. And in this case, what they get is, well, kind of unsettling.
Remember how in this perfect world, everyone's paired with their ideal partner? Well, that's where things get really interesting with Sammy, because his reunion with his ex-wife, Brenda, really throws a wrench into that whole ideal partner thing, you know?
Right. It's like that old saying, be careful what you wish for. One minute, Sammy's grappling with his new reality, and the next, bam, there's Brenda, back in his life as if their messy, painful breakup never even happened.
And what's so clever about the way Bumer handles this is that he uses this seemingly idyllic reunion, the whole getting back with your ex thing that so many people fantasize about.
Yeah.
He used it to highlight the inherent paradox of erasing problems.
Because let's be honest, who hasn't thought about, like, undoing a breakup, right? Going back to that time before things got complicated.
Exactly.
Mm.
But as Sammy quickly discovers, this version of Brenda, this perfect version, isn't actually the same woman he fell in love with.
It's like, be careful what you wish for, right? You might not be getting what you thought you were getting.
Exactly. In this new reality, yeah, their relationship is free from conflict, but it's also missing that spark, that unpredictable energy that makes love.
Love. It's like they've become these two perfectly matched robots, just going through the motions without any real passion.
Totally. And as Sammy's dealing with this unsettling realization, he starts to find himself, believe it or not, yearning for the old Brenda, the one who challenged him, the one who made him, really work for her affection.
He even starts to, like, romanticize their arguments, which is kind of a red flag, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's a classic case of wanting what we can't have. By removing all the imperfections, all the things that used to frustrate Sammy about Brenda, Brumer subtly highlights how those flaws actually played a part in making her who she was, this complex, interesting, real person.
And this is where Brumer takes us even deeper into this idea of a perfect world, right? Because it's not just about erasing problems in the present, it's about rewriting history, eliminating any choices that might have led to those problems in the first place.
Exactly. And by removing choice, Brumer introduces this really unsettling possibility that free will, that fundamental thing that makes us human, has been sacrificed for this idea of preordained happiness.
Okay, so let me get this straight. No more painful breakups, no more regrets, but also no more free will.
Yeah.
No ability to shape your own destiny. That's
Yeah.
kind of terrifying, right?
It is a pretty chilling thought. And it gets to the heart of what Brumer's exploring in the novel. This idea that true happiness, true fulfillment can't exist without the freedom to choose, even if those choices lead to, uncomfortable or even painful outcomes.
Okay, so we've got Gustavo, who's starting to realize that a life without Martha's quirks is kind of meaningless. And then we've got Sammy, who's missing the drama, the passion, even the arguments with his ex-wife. So where do they go from here? What happens next?
Well, this is where the story takes an even more mind-bending turn. Both Gustavo and Sammy start having these incredibly vivid, almost too real to be true dreams. And in these dreams, they keep encountering this mysterious figure who seems to hold all the answers about how this perfect world came to be.
Okay, hold up. Mystery Man enters the picture. Is he like a benevolent guide, a villain controlling everything behind the scenes? What's the deal with this guy?
It's unclear at first. Boomer keeps his true nature shrouded in mystery. But what's important is what he reveals to Gustavo and Sammy. He tells them that the only way they can truly understand this perfect world, really get to the bottom of what's going on, is to experience it as someone who was born into it, someone who's never known anything else.
Whoa, so it's like to understand utopia, you have to see it through the eyes of someone who's never known anything but utopia.
Exactly. It's like Boomer is setting up the ultimate test case, right? Can someone who has never experienced hardship, who has never had to make a difficult choice, can they truly appreciate, even comprehend, what it means to live a life that includes problems, that includes pain?
Okay, now, that is a good cliffhanger. Both Gustavo and Sammy, now in on the secret inner workings of this utopian society, are about to get a crash course in what it means to be a perfect human. And from what I've gathered, is not exactly what they were expecting. So last we left our protagonists, they were about to get a crash course in perfect living, right? And it's weird because as they dive deeper into this world, they both start to notice all these subtle changes happening. But the changes are to them, not around them.
Yeah, it's like that classic sci-fi trope where the environment starts to change the person, but Boomer gives it this really unsettling twist.
Totally. It's not like they're being physically transformed or anything, but mentally, emotionally, something's definitely shifting within them, and not necessarily for the better.
Exactly. And what's so unsettling about this part of the novel is how Broomer shows us these subtle but insidious ways that, well, you could even say our surroundings can actually shape our thoughts, maybe even our identities. Like, are we ever truly in control, or is it all just context? It makes you wonder.
Right, like how much of who we are is shaped by the world around us versus like some innate sense of self. And Gustavo's a prime example of this, right? Remember how he was fighting this whole manufactured happiness thing tooth and nail? Well, now he's starting to sound a lot like, well, everyone else.
Yeah, he's almost like a different person.
Totally. He agrees with everything Martha says now, even when it makes no sense. And it's not just that he's being agreeable, it's like he's lost that spark, that ability to challenge, to disagree,
It's almost as if that part of him, the part that was capable of critical thinking, of pushing back against the norm, it's like it's been, I don't know, deactivated or something.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it, right? Like, what are we without our doubts, our disagreements?
Exactly. And it's not just happening to Gustavo. Bumer describes this whole society where conversations are just empty, surface-level chit-chat, totally devoid of any real substance or meaning.
Everyone's walking around with these fixed smiles plastered on their faces, but behind those smiles, yeah, it's just blankness, like they've been emptied out or something.
It's eerie, right? A world where everyone agrees on everything. No debates, no dissenting opinions, no intellectual curiosity. I don't know about you, but it gives me the chills just thinking about it.
Me too. And this gets to the core of what Burmer's trying to say, right? This idea that a world without problems sounds amazing in theory. Who wouldn't want that? But when you actually strip away all the challenges, the imperfections, the messy stuff that makes life, well, life, what are you left with?
Right, is it even human at that point? And that's the question Burmer leaves us with.
It's a tough one. Like, do Gustavo and Sammy just surrender to this manufactured happiness? Do they accept becoming these shells of their former selves, content in this weird artificial paradise? Or do they cling to their individuality, even if it means existing in this perpetual state of unease, forever yearning for a world that's gone?
And the novel doesn't give us any easy answers. There's no clear resolution, no tidy ending. And I think that's what makes it so brilliant, so haunting. It forces us to sit with these uncomfortable questions about happiness, free will, and what it truly means to be human. It's the kind of story that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It really does make you think. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Luz, Refugio ante la Obscuridad, I'm curious, what about you? What part of your imperfect life, with all its messy realities, would you be most hesitant to give up, even for a guarantee of happiness?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure. And for anyone listening, if you're intrigued by these ideas, do yourself a favor and check out Mario Bumer's Luz, Refugio ante la Obscuridad. You won't regret it. Until next time, happy reading. And remember, sometimes the most unsettling questions lead to the most fascinating discoveries. Okay, so today's deep dive, it's a bit different.
Different? How so?
It's like, you know how we usually have like a clear story?
Right, a narrative we're following.
Exactly. This time, it's more like puzzle pieces scattered everywhere.
Interesting. What kind of puzzle pieces are we talking about?
Police reports, for one, but like the really old kind. Barely legible.
Ah, the kind that make you work for the information. I like those.
Right. And we've got these journal entries, but they're like fragmentary. Whispers, almost.
Someone trying to make sense of the chaos themselves, maybe?
That's the feeling I get.
Yeah.
And there are these conversations, or at least fragments of conversations, like echoes of something that happened a long time ago.
Sounds like we're in for a challenge.
Wow.
So what's the story we're trying to piece together from these scattered remnants?
Crazy Falls. Ever heard of it?
Can't say I have.
It seems like the kind of town you see on postcards, you know, quiet, peaceful, little river running through it.
Picturesque.
Exactly. But under the surface.
There's always but under the surface. That's where the good stuff is.
Right. There's this undercurrent, this sense of wrongness, like something happened there that stained the whole place.
And that's where we come in, to uncover those stains. So where do we even begin with a puzzle this fragmented?
We start with two friends, Bernard and Robert. Their lives, their town, everything changes with the death of a classmate, Daniel Stewart.
Death. That's never a good sign. How'd this Daniel die?
Found dead. But not just dead, it's the circumstances. They suggest something more than just, an accident or even a regular murder.
Sinister, you said.
Yeah, like something pulled straight from a nightmare. And the more we dig, the more it seems like our friends, Bernard and Robert, they stumbled onto something bigger than themselves.
They found the body.
They did. In this, it's a shortcut through some trees. Yeah. Locals call it Death Street.
Catchy, subtle, but catchy.
And here's where it gets really strange. Bernard, he had this wound, a deep gash on his arm, like he was slashed by something.
Any idea what caused it?
None. Nothing in the police reports, nothing in Bernard's own writing. It's like whatever happened at Death Street, it left its mark on him. physically.
A physical manifestation of a deeper trauma, maybe?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. Bernard starts having these nightmares.
Yeah.
Vivid, terrifying, and always the same.
About that night.
About a figure. A shadowy presence he can't quite make out, but it's always there, lurking in the darkness, haunting him.
Okay, so we've got a suspicious death, a mysterious injury, and now terrifying nightmares. And these two friends are right at the center of it. What about this girl, Carla? Where does she fit in?
She's connected to both Bernard and Robert. And guess what? She's having the same nightmares.
Oh, this just gets better and better. 3 people, all haunted by the same terrifying visions. Sounds like whatever darkness permeates Crazy Falls, it's got a way of spreading.
It's like a contagion. That's a feeling I get. And there's one more thing. A name that keeps popping up in the nightmares in the margins of these old reports.
Let me guess it's not a name like Betty or Tom.
Edna Tupsody.
Edna Tupsody. All right, that's definitely going on the list of things to investigate. Who is she, and why is her name haunting the dreams of our Crazy Falls trio?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Edna Topsody. It's like her name is a key or something.
A key to what?
To another part of this whole thing. It's like Crazy Falls is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so where does this Edna lead us? Out of Crazy Falls.
Baltimore.
Baltimore. Okay, we're hopping across state lines now. What's the connection?
Carla, her brother Alexander, disappeared from Baltimore a year before Daniel died in Crazy Falls. He turns up again, right after Daniel's death. Back in Baltimore.
But
He's not the same. Alexander, I mean. According to Carla, he's withdrawn, like something scared him. And he's having the same nightmares. The shadowy figure, the feeling of being watched, just like Bernard and Carla.
so we've got this name, Edna Topsody, connected to Baltimore. We've got Carla's brother, Alexander, who disappears and reappears changed, haunted by the same nightmares as our Crazy Falls friends. What are we thinking? Coincidence.
That's what I thought at first. But there's more. It turns out Edna Topsody, she lived in Baltimore too, years ago. And guess what?
She had the nightmares.
Bingo. Same nightmares, same shadowy figure, same dread. It's all there in these old reports Ednog dug up.
Hold on. Ednog, who's this now? Are we adding another player to this whole thing?
Right, sorry. Ednog, he's this investigator who got interested in the mumbler phenomenon.
The what now? Mumbler phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like this thing, this entity, maybe, that people say is connected to Edna Topsody, some kind of malevolent presence, and it gets passed down through generations.
Passed down, you mean like an inheritance?
Exactly. And get this, according to local folklore, the mumbler, it latches onto families, feeds on their fear, drives them to do terrible things.
So we're not just talking about bad dreams here. We're talking about something that can influence people, control them even. And this thing, this mumbler, has been linked to violence, madness, even death.
You got it. And guess who else fits into that family tree? Carla.
And the baby!
Oh, man, this is heavy. So not only is Carla dealing with these terrifying nightmares, but she might be carrying the next link in this mumbler chain. Talk about pressure.
Right. And it gets worse. Remember those cliffs near Death Street? The ones Bernard was convinced held some kind of answer to all this? He falls.
Falls. As in...
Dead. They ruled it an accident, but...
But you're not so sure. Given everything else going on, I can't say I blame you. And here's the kicker. After Bernard's death, Carla, she starts hearing his voice.
Hearing his voice, like, in her head.
In her dreams. He tells her to protect the child. Says the baby isn't what they fear. It's a message of hope, almost.
In all this darkness, that's a pretty big ask.
I know, right? But that's where we leave Carla, at least for now, facing an impossible choice, haunted by nightmares and clinging to a message from beyond the grave. A message from beyond the grave. It's like something out of a horror movie, you know?
Right, but for Carla, it might be the only thing keeping her sane. Think about it. She's carrying a child that could be the key to all of this, and she's completely alone with this decision.
Because, let's be real, even if she believes Bernard, even if she trusts this message from wherever, it goes against everything she's learned about the mumbler.
Exactly. This isn't just about one town or one family anymore. We're talking about a pattern of behavior, a cycle of violence that stretches back generations. And if the mumbler is real, if it can be passed down like some kind of twisted inheritance, well, Carla's carrying a whole lot more than just a baby.
So what does she do? Does she listen to Bernard's message?
She does. Carla chooses to keep the baby, chooses hope over fear, even though every instinct must be screaming at her to run.
It's a hell of a gamble, though, right? Betting your life, your child's life, on a message from a dead man. So what happens? Does it work? Does she break the cycle?
That's the thing about this deep dive. We don't get a neat little bow to tie everything up. Carla's story, at least the part we have access to, it just ends.
So we're left hanging. What about the mumbler? What about this whole inheritance of darkness?
Well, that's where our friend Ednog comes back in. Remember him, the investigator. He stumbles across this book written by a woman named Jennifer Smale. She claims to have encountered the mumbler firsthand.
Wait, so she's like a survivor, someone who actually dealt with this thing and lived to tell the tale.
That's what she claims, and her story, well, let's just say it doesn't paint a pretty picture. According to Smale, the mumbler isn't just some local legend, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
That's the investigation. She describes this pattern, these echoes of the mumbler's influence popping up throughout history.
This is like what? Some kind of ancient evil, a force of darkness that's been around for centuries?
That's one way to look at it. But here's the thing that really stuck with me. Smale, she suggests that the mumbler, it doesn't just influence us from the outside, it feeds on something inside of us.
Like what?
Our fear, our anger, our darkest impulses.
So what you're saying is the real monster, it might be us.
That's the question Smale leaves us with. And honestly, after this deep dive, after all the whispers and shadows we've uncovered, it's a question that's going to stay with me for a while.
Yeah, this one's definitely going to keep me up at night. So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that some mysteries, they don't have easy answers. Sometimes the more we learn, the less certain we become.
That's for sure. We started this deep dive looking for a story, and we ended up with, well, more questions than answers.
But isn't that the point sometimes? To embrace the unknown, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. Maybe that's where the real learning begins.
Maybe you're right. Either way, I think it's time to turn on some lights and maybe listen to something a little less unsettling. Until next time, keep asking questions, but maybe steer clear of any shadowy figures whispering promises in your dreams. Get ready, because this deep dive is a wild ride. We're taking a look at Profundo, Breve Tumor.
Which translates to,
Deep, brief fear.
okay, I see why you said to get ready.
Yeah, and the story definitely lives up to its name.
Let's hear it.
So it's by Sergio M. Bustamante, and it's an excerpt from DISD73.pdf, a whole other mystery we won't get into right now. But basically, it's a manuscript that plays a huge role in this whole thing. At the center of it all, we have Elena.
Tell me about Elena.
Well, on the surface, she seems pretty normal. She craves change.
Don't we all?
Exactly. But she has a very, very strange way of going about finding it, especially when it comes to making friends.
Interesting. How so?
Well, that's where things start to get a little deep, brief fear on us. See, she gets these sudden urges, like out of the blue, she'll feel this desperate need to meet someone new.
Okay, that's a little different, but I wouldn't necessarily call it creepy yet.
Oh, just wait. It gets better. These urges, they're always paired with these really specific food cravings. Like, she'll be overwhelmed with this desire for a very particular combination of food.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so picture this. She gets this craving, right? But it's not just like, oh, I could go for a burger. It's crazy specific. Think a mountain of fries, but they have to be drowning in ketchup and mustard.
Ugh.
And then, because that's not enough, she also needs a slice of lemon pie and, oh yeah, some roasted chicken on the side.
Okay, that's random. I mean, I appreciate a good craving as much as the next person, but that's a lot.
Right. But here's the thing. The second she decides, okay, I'm going to satisfy this craving, poof, it vanishes. Gone. Replaced with this overwhelming urge to go somewhere, to do something completely out of character.
Wait, so it's not the food itself she craves, it's like the craving is a signal.
Yes. And the thing is, the places she ends up, she's never even thought about them before. Like, one minute she's about to order that mountain of fries, and the next she's compelled to go to the ice skating rink.
Hold on. What does any of this have to do with making friends?
That's where she meets them. Like, at the ice skating rink, she meets Ernesto.
So she's guided by these cravings, these urges to meet these people.
That's the thing. Is she being guided? Or is it just a series of really weird coincidences?
Okay, I'm officially creeped out. It's like some invisible force is playing puppet master with her life.
Right. And to make matters even more unsettling, Elena's already carrying a lot of baggage when all this weirdness starts happening.
What kind of baggage are we talking about?
Well, she's dealing with some major betrayals. Like, her best friend, Bianca, dies tragically in a train accident.
Oh, wow. That's awful.
Right. And then, to make matters worse, her other best friend, Elsa, is totally cold about it.
Wow, some friend.
Seriously. And as if that wasn't enough, Her passionate love affair with this charming Italian guy, Marcello, total sham. He's married. Elena was just a fling while the wife was away.
So she's been through the ringer, emotionally speaking. Betrayal and loss like that would leave anyone feeling raw, vulnerable.
Right. It kind of makes you wonder if that vulnerability makes her more susceptible to whatever's going on with these urges and encounters.
It definitely adds another layer to the whole thing, doesn't it? Makes you question what's really driving these connections she's making.
Speaking of connections, there's one more person we need to introduce. Mariano. He's an ex-boyfriend of Elena's, and he's the one who gives her this manuscript, Desde el 73.
Desde el 73, what does that mean?
It translates to since 73. We're not sure exactly what it refers to, but it seems significant, doesn't it? Especially considering Mariano's whole thing is reincarnation.
Reincarnation, like he believes in past lives.
Oh yeah, he's all about it. And he's passing that fascination, that belief system, on to Elena through this manuscript.
And that's when the dreams start.
That's when the dreams start. These really intense, fragmented dreams that she can never quite remember when she wakes up.
But they feel connected to the manuscript somehow.
Exactly. Like they're infused with that same unsettling energy, you know?
I think we need to unpack this manuscript. It's funny, Elena, she's all about new experiences, right? But she's hesitant about the manuscript, almost wary of it.
Like she knows it's not going to be all sunshine and roses.
Exactly. There's this sense of foreboding that whatever's in that book, it's powerful and maybe not in a good way.
And yet she lends it to Fabiola.
Which, let's be honest, we kind of saw coming.
Right, like it was always going to end up in someone else's hands.
It's like Bustamante is setting up a domino effect. First Elena, then Fabiola. Who knows who's next?
And that's when things go from weird to straight up terrifying. Fabiola calls Elena after reading the manuscript, and it's like she's a different person.
Possessed, almost.
Totally. But it's not just that she's experiencing the same urges and cravings as Elena. She even uses the same phrase, word for word.
Let me guess. I have to leave you. I promised to meet a friend I haven't seen in ages.
Exactly. It's like the book planted those words in her mouth. And remember how Elena never actually gave Fabiola a picture, but Fabiola claims to have one?
Okay, yeah, that's next level creepy. It's like the book is rewriting reality, infiltrating their lives in these small but significant ways.
And it only gets creepier, because remember those messages Elena found in the book? They suddenly make a lot more sense.
The ones written in Spanish.
Yeah, like this one. Y ella, que surgió de una efímera tormenta de luces azules sobre el gran charco salado, tomará parte de mis palabras, y será media Navidad con quien sea mi lector, será la reposición de un difunto cercano. Jamás deberían darle la espalda a ese intempestuoso camino, pues en él hallarán las respuestas a sus plegarias.
Okay, break that down for me. What does it mean?
Basically, it says, and she, who emerged from an ephemeral storm of blue lights over the Great Salt Lake, will take part of my words, and will be half and half with whoever my reader is. She will be the replacement of a close deceased. They should never turn their backs on this stormy path, for in it they will find the answers to their prayers.
She will be the replacement of a close deceased. Chills. It's like the book is talking about Fabiola, like she's being set up to replace someone.
Right. Someone who's gone. And then there's that part about the stormy path and finding answers to their prayers. It's like a threat disguised as a promise, don't you think?
Totally. Like there's no turning back now, you're in too deep. And it gets even more intense. There's another message where it's like the book is speaking directly to Elena. Aún no te has dado cuenta. No hasta después del indispensable e insustituible momento de reflexión, pero no temas, seré tu guía y nadie más se atreverá a traicionarte.
Which means?
You haven't realized yet, not until after the indispensable and irreplaceable moment of reflection, but fear not, I will be your guide, and no one else will dare betray you. It's offering a twisted kind of comfort. Like, don't worry, I'm here for you, Elena.
But at what cost? Right. It's like whatever's in that book, it wants to control her, to consume her identity.
And just when you think it can't get any weirder, Elena finds another message. Está llamando ahora.
Which means?
She's calling now. And guess what? The phone rings. It's Fabiola.
Talk about a perfectly timed jump scare. And those phone calls? Bone-chilling. Fabiola's behavior is completely erratic. Her voice starts to change. It's like it's not even her on the other end of the line anymore.
So what does Elena do?
She panics. Tries to destroy the book. She sets it on fire right there in the sink, hoping to sever whatever connection it has on her, on Fabiola.
But it's too late, isn't it?
It's too late. By the end of the excerpt, Elena's calling her other friend, Elsa, and you'll never guess what she says.
She uses the phrase, doesn't she? The one about meeting an old friend.
Word for word. It's like the book or whatever's inside it has infected her. taken root, and we're left with this terrifying cliffhanger. What happened to Fabiola? Is she gone? Replaced?
It's definitely implied, right. And Elsa, none the wiser, is about to walk right into the same trap.
Bustamante really leaves you with a sense of dread, of inevitability. It's like this force, whatever it is, it can't be stopped.
It makes you think about the nature of identity, doesn't it? What makes us who we are? Are we just vessels waiting to be filled?
Right. Can something really overwrite who you are at your core? Or is there something inside us that's untouchable, unchangeable? I mean, that's some serious existential stuff right there.
And the manuscript itself, Desdale 73, it's like a key.
To what, though? Another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
A prison cell for some ancient evil.
Well, and think about the title, since 73, since a date, a year, an event.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But it implies a beginning, a point of origin for whatever's going on,
Right.
which circles back to Mariano and his obsession with reincarnation.
You know, he really thought he was giving Alina a gift.
Talk about a backfire. It's like he unwittingly opened a Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And now Elena's paying the price.
And possibly Elsa, too.
It makes you wonder if there are other Desdale 73s out there, other books, other objects, just waiting to unleash something terrible.
I think that's the point, isn't it? Bustamante wants us to question what we consume, what we believe, what we allow to influence us.
That's like a warning, right? Be careful what you read, because you never know what might be lurking between the lines. So there you have it, folks. Profundo brevitimor. Deep, brief fear. A story that will stay with you long after you finish listening. So, ready to dive into another story?
Always.
Okay. Well, today we're looking at El Indefenso
Okay.
by Sergio M. Bustamante.
Bustamante. Yeah, I've read some of his other stuff. This one looks at some pretty heavy themes.
Yeah, betrayal, justice, trust, or really the lack of it, I guess.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about how we
Yeah.
navigate those things in our own lives.
Definitely, definitely. And what really struck me, I mean, just from the excerpts, this story wastes no time. We're thrown right into the action with our main man, Dante,
Yeah.
who seems like, on the surface, he's got it together, young, successful,
Right, right.
but he's stuck in this messy divorce.
Well, and it's not just messy, right? I mean, this is a marriage built on deception.
Yeah.
This woman, Nuriella, she's cunning.
Oh, absolutely.
She's manipulative.
She's playing chess while Dante's playing checkers,
Exactly.
Like, take the whole shotgun wedding thing. She claims she's pregnant.
Which is
Pressuring into marriage.
Right. A classic tactic, and one that unfortunately still works.
Oh, for sure.
But what's interesting here is that Dante, he's not completely clueless. I mean, he's insisting on these doctor visits, wants proof, but somehow
He's suspicious.
he is.
Yeah.
But Nuriella, she's good. She always has a way to explain it away,
Right.
to dodge showing any real evidence.
It's like, how much of that is like wanting to believe her, wanting it to be true, versus just being willfully ignorant?
That's the question, right. And Bustamante does a brilliant job of making us ask that about Dante.
Yeah.
Is he blinded by love, by guilt? It's never explicitly stated,
Yeah.
but those little details he throws in,
Oh, tell me about those. Yeah.
like she refuses to show him medical bills.
Mm.
Dante finds hidden tampons. These are subtle but powerful hints that something's off.
And for Dante, those doubts, they just keep building and building.
Right, and you can feel his frustration growing. He knows he's been played.
He just can't prove it.
Exactly, and that's what makes this story so compelling. How do you fight a lie, especially when it comes to the law?
Especially in court, right? I mean, we all know the legal system.
It's not about feelings, it's about evidence.
Yeah, it wants cold, hard facts. And
Mhm.
in Dante's case, those seem pretty elusive.
His lawyer, you can tell he's struggling. How do you build a case when the very foundation, this supposed pregnancy, is a sham?
So poor Dante, he's dealing with the emotional fallout of this whole manipulative marriage. And to top it off, he's trapped in this legal system that feels rigged against him.
It's a recipe for despair.
It really makes you think about how quickly life can spiral, 1 minute you're on top of the world, the next you're drowning in doubt and facing a system that feels impossible to fight.
Absolutely. And it's in that moment of vulnerability that Dante encounters someone who will change everything. A young boy named Eusebio.
And that's where things get really interesting. Eusebio, right? So we have Dante at this low point, and then he meets this young boy, Eusebio, who's living a completely different kind of hard life on the streets.
And it's that contrast that I find so fascinating.
Oh, definitely.
You have Dante, who has material wealth, but he's trapped.
Right, trapped by this web of lies.
Exactly. And then there's Eusebio, who has nothing, really, but
But he's got this, like, street smarts,
Exactly. Resilience, he's had to fight for everything.
And you see something in Eusebio, I don't know, it's like, what is it in Dante that makes him want to help this kid, despite everything he's going through?
Well, I think there's a part of him that sees a bit of himself in Eusebio.
Really?
That vulnerability, that sense of being alone against the world.
Because in a way, they're both alone, aren't they?
Exactly. So when Dante offers Eusebio shelter, considers helping him find a more permanent place.
It's like he's trying to make things right,
But for someone else.
yeah, like maybe he can't fix his own situation yet.
Right.
So he focuses on what he can control.
Which is helping Eusebio.
And that's where that theme of trust comes in so strongly again, right?
Yeah.
Because here's Dante, who's been so deeply betrayed.
By his own wife, no less.
Exactly. And he opens his home, his life, to this kid he barely knows.
It's a risk, for sure. And Eusebio, he's cautious at first.
As he should be, right?
Of course, of course. He's used to looking out for number one, not trusting anyone. But gradually, a bond develops.
I mean, who doesn't love a good found family trope, right?
Right. It tugs at the heartstrings. But it also allows Bustamante to explore those different facets of trust.
So Dante starts to heal a little through helping Eusebio.
You see him come alive again. He starts seeing Veronica, his ex, again.
Yeah, and even his lawyer. I mean, things are starting to look up in the divorce proceedings, too.
Right. It's like this renewed sense of hope. And part of that comes from the plan his lawyer creates.
Oh, yeah, the lawyer's big plan. Let's break
Oh.
that down a bit because it's pretty audacious.
It really is. So they know they need leverage against Nuriella, something to expose her true nature
Because so far, she's playing the innocent victim.
perfectly. So the lawyer, he comes up with this idea.
Okay.
Use her greed against her.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. They're going to let her think she's winning by demanding an outrageous sum in the divorce settlement.
So she gets greedy and overplays her hand.
Exactly. It's risky.
For sure.
But the hope is that it'll reveal her true colors to the court.
It's like they're setting a trap.
Exactly. And, what's the worst that could happen, right?
But that's what I want to know. What could go wrong? This is a story about betrayal, after all. What's Eusebio's role in all of this?
Ugh, that's where things take another turn. See, Eusebio, fiercely loyal.
Like we said?
He's been watching everything unfold, and he's not just a passive observer. He's got his own ideas about protecting Dante.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, is right. Dante's finally feeling hopeful, but little does he know.
Oh, no.
Eusebio's about to take matters into his own hands.
So, last we left our story, Dante's feeling pretty good, hopeful even, thanks to his lawyer's risky plan, completely unaware that Eusebio is about to,
Throw a wrench in the work.
you could say that again. I mean, we talked about his loyalty, his street smarts. He's been watching Dante get played this whole time, and
He's furious. He sees Nuriella for what she is.
a total shark.
Exactly, and he's not going to stand by and
But heroin.
let her hurt Dante any more than she already has.
So he decides to take matters into his own hands, which, let's be real,
Not the best idea.
not always a good look.
Yeah.
But you gotta sympathize with him, right? He's a kid trying to protect the only father figure he's ever known, and he knows how the game is played.
Well, on the streets, at least.
Right. So he gathers some of his friends
These are kids who have grown up fast, toughened by circumstance.
who know how to get things done.
Exactly. And they head over to Nuriella's place in the dead of night. Now, Bustamante, he doesn't dwell on the specifics.
Thank goodness.
But we get the picture, right? It's a break-in, things get out of hand,
No control.
an assault. By the time the police arrive, it's chaos.
And who do you think is sound asleep through all of this?
Dante, blissfully unaware.
Oblivious. Can you imagine?
The poor guy. He's woken up by the police at his doorstep, probably thinking it's about the divorce.
Right. And bam. Arrest.
Just like that. Accused of being the mastermind behind the whole attack on Nuriella.
Talk about a twist of the knife.
And of course, Nuriella, ever the opportunist, she seizes the moment.
She turns on the waterworks.
Oh, she plays the victim to perfection. Suddenly, all of Dante's attempts to expose her lies.
His frustration, his wanting out of the marriage,
It's all twisted.
it's all proof of his violent nature,
Exactly. It's heartbreaking because it shines a light on
on how easily the narrative can be manipulated.
exactly and how quick people are to believe the worst, especially when it confirms our existing biases.
So, not only is Dante facing charges for something he didn't do, but his reputation is
Tarnished.
completely shattered. And to add insult to injury, remember his lawyer? The one who was supposed to be on his side?
Yeah, the one who came up with the risky plan in the first place.
He wants nothing to do with Dante now. Too risky.
Guilt by association. Dante's toxic.
Dante's all alone. And a cruel twist of irony, this man who was so desperate for freedom from his marriage.
Ends up in prison, denied bail. Talk about a punch to the gut.
It's gut-wrenching. Bustamante doesn't give us a happy ending here.
No, he doesn't. He leaves us with a very real, very unsettling picture of how easily good intentions.
How easily doing the right thing can backfire.
Spectacularly. And how the very systems that are supposed to protect us can
Sometimes be the very things that break us.
Exactly. It's a lot to grapple with, and I think that's the point. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading, prompting some serious reflection.
Definitely. It makes you think about how we navigate a world where trust is so fragile.
And justice isn't always a given. So next time you find yourself wanting to do the right thing,
Maybe take a moment to consider the potential consequences, however unintended they may be.
because in the end, we're all responsible for the choices we make, and sometimes even the best intentions can pave the road to hell.
A sobering thought, and one that I think will stay with our listeners for a while. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into El Indefenso. Join us next time when we'll buckle up, listeners, because this deep dive is going to take us into some seriously murky waters.
Murky's right. We're talking trust, betrayal, good intentions gone bad. Just the kind of stuff this story has got in spades.
You got that right. We're diving into El Indefenso, that's The Defenseless, a short story by Sergio M. Bustamante. And let me tell you, this one's going to stay with you.
Oh, absolutely. Bustamante takes a simple premise, a guy going through a divorce, and twists it into this really powerful exploration of, well, like you said, trust, betrayal, the consequences of trying to do the right thing.
And sometimes those consequences are brutal. We meet Dante, our main character, smack dab in the middle of a messy separation from his wife, Nuriella. He just wants out, wants to move on, which, come on, anyone who's been through a divorce gets it. But Nuriella, she's got other plans.
Yeah, you get the sense from the get-go that something's off about their relationship. Dante sees her as manipulative, vindictive even, but he keeps underestimating her at every turn. It's kind of fascinating to watch it unfold, honestly.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, you know? You can see it coming, but you can't look away. And speaking of foreshadowing, that title, The Defenseless, makes you wonder who we're really talking about here, right? Because at first glance, Dante seems anything but defenseless.
Exactly. He's a successful businessman, got his own textile business, inherited it, actually, financially secure, used to being in control. You really feel his frustration as he realizes none of that matters in this situation with Nuriella.
And then, boom, just like that, Nuriella drops a bombshell. She's pregnant. Talk about throwing a wrench in Dante's plans for a clean break, huh?
It's the catalyst for everything that follows. Suddenly, Dante's forced to reevaluate his entire relationship with Nuriella, a relationship he already had doubts about.
And those rose-colored glasses he was wearing, yeah, they start to come off. He remembers how quickly things moved with Nuriella, how smitten he was. But those memories are tainted now, colored by suspicion and a growing distrust.
Bustamante does a fantastic job of highlighting that shift in Dante's perspective. At the beginning, he describes Nuriella as this beautiful flower, but now she's poisonous ivy, full of stinging hairs and malice. Talk about a 180.
No kidding. It's clear Dante's starting to see Nuriella for who she really is, but here's the catch. He's got to prove it. He pushes for doctor's appointments, demands to see receipts, anything to confirm this pregnancy. But Nuriella, always evasive, always one step ahead with an excuse for why he can't be involved.
And the tension just builds and builds. Dante's suspicions are growing stronger, but he's trapped. Still legally married, no concrete evidence, completely powerless to fight back.
Like a fly caught in a spider web, right?
Uh-huh.
The more he struggles, the more tangled he becomes, until one day he stumbles upon something that changes everything. A hidden box of tampons. And yeah, you could just imagine the look on his face. Talk about a game changer. Like all the puzzle pieces click into place for Dante, but the picture they make, even more messed up than he imagined.
Oh, totally. The box of tampons is like this concrete proof, the symbol of Nuriella's lies, but it also kind of pushes Dante further into a corner.
Because now what? He knows she's lying, but proving it? That's a whole other beast.
Exactly. And the frustration just oozes off the page. Dante's stuck in this absurd situation, dealing with a legal system that feels more like a broken machine than anything resembling justice.
It's got to be infuriating. To know the truth, but to have it mean so little in the eyes of the law. But there's this one part, I gotta say, it really surprised me. Dante actually feels sorry for Nuriella at one point.
It's a really interesting layer to his character, right? Even with all the anger, the resentment, Dante still has this I don't know, maybe it's a sliver of compassion. He doesn't want to stoop to her level.
He wants to believe there's a right way to do this, even if it seems like the whole world's gone bad.
Absolutely. He's clinging to his principles, trying to untangle this mess without compromising his own integrity. It's a losing battle, but you can't help but admire him for troning.
But let's be real. Every move he makes seems to dig him deeper. And just when you think it can't get any crazier, bam, enter Eusebio.
Talk about a plot twist. This is where Bustamante throws a real curveball.
This street-smart kid, Eusebio, he becomes this, symbol of hope for Dante, but also the catalyst for total disaster.
It's a brilliant move by Bustamante, really, introducing this whole other layer of complexity into an already tangled story.
For sure. So picture this. Dante's just left another dead-end meeting with his lawyer, feeling totally defeated. Stops at a traffic light, and out of nowhere, this kid pops up, wants to clean his windshield.
Eusebio, and you can practically feel Dante's hesitation, right? Like, is this really happening?
I think there's a part of him, maybe it's pity, maybe it's just wanting to do something, anything good, that makes him give the kid a few pesos.
It's such a small act of kindness, this tiny little exchange, but it ends up having huge consequences.
Because Eusebio doesn't just take the money and run. Oh no. This kid looks Dante dead in the eye and says, "Take me to live with you," right? Talk about a bold move.
It's a gutsy move, that's for sure, but it's also a desperate plea. This is a kid who knows how to survive, who knows what he needs to do to get by.
And Dante, he's totally caught off guard. But something about Eusebio, his honesty maybe, or the sheer audacity of that request, it gets to him.
And just like that, this unlikely bond starts to form.
Right. It's not some cheesy savior complex thing either. Dante's not trying to fix Eusebio. He sees something in him, some spark, and he decides to take a chance.
And thank goodness he does, because under Dante's care, Eusebio starts to thrive. His language improves. He's got this newfound hope.
But you can practically hear the but coming, can't you?
There's this undercurrent of anger in Eusebio, especially towards Nuriella, once he learns about everything she's put Dante through.
And that's when things start to get really interesting. Because on one hand, you've got this heartwarming mentorship blossoming between Dante and Eusebio. But on the other, there's this simmering rage that's impossible to ignore.
It's like watching a powder keg about to explode. You know something's going to happen, you just don't know when or how bad it's going to be.
And explode it does. Talk about an understatement. Bustamante doesn't hold back on the drama in this final act.
Nope, he cranks it up to 11. Just when Dante thinks he's found a way out, found a way to expose Nuriella for the fraud she is, everything blows up in his face.
It's brutal, man. Like 1 minute, he's up, he's feeling hopeful. The next, he's public enemy number 1.
And the worst part, it's all thanks to Eusebio, this kid he's tried to help, tried to give a better life.
It's almost Shakespearean, the way this good deed backfires so spectacularly. What was it you said earlier about good intentions and unintended consequences?
Yeah, and this is a prime example. Bustamante really drives that point home with this whole attack on Nuriella, because it's not just that Eusebio takes it upon himself to protect Dante, it's how he does it. It's brutal.
Talk about your misguided loyalty. This is way beyond sticking up for a friend. Way beyond.
Totally. He gets his friends together, they break into Nuriella's apartment in the middle of the night, and it all goes sideways from there.
It's a bloodbath. I'm assuming things get out of control pretty fast.
You could say that. One of Eusebio's friends ends up dead. The others arrested, facing some serious jail time, and Eusebio hauled off to juvenile detention, his future hanging by a thread.
And Nuriella, she's okay?
Physically, she's fine. A little shaken up, understandably, but unharmed. But she's smart, Nuriella. She knows an opportunity when she sees one.
Ah, here we go. So she turns the tables, plays the victim, paints Dante as this mastermind behind the whole thing.
Bingo. And the worst part is, people buy it. They eat it up. This image of Dante, this successful businessman, he's instantly the villain.
Even though he had nothing to do with it, even though he never would have wanted any of this.
It's the power of perception, right? And the justice system. It's not always about truth. It's about who can spin the better story, who can play the game.
And in this case, Nuriella, she plays it perfectly. Dante becomes El Indefenso, stripped of his power, labeled a criminal because of someone else's misguided actions.
And what's really gut-wrenching is that the story ends without a neat resolution. We don't know what happens to Dante. Does he ever clear his name? Does the truth come out?
It's left open, this big question mark hanging over everything. And that's what makes this story so powerful, so unsettling. Because it forces us to sit with that discomfort, with the knowledge that sometimes life just doesn't tie things up in a neat bow.
Exactly. We like to believe in a just world, but Ellen DeFenso throws that notion right out the window. It's a story about the dark side of good intentions, the weight of our choices, and the fragility of trust. And those are themes that resonate long after the story is over.
They do. They really do. Well, listeners, there you have it. Another deep dive into the murky, thought-provoking world of literature. We'll be back soon with another story, another chance to explore the dark corners of the human experience. Until then, keep reading, keep questioning, and maybe, just maybe, keep a closer eye on those good intentions. You never know where they might lead. Ever get that feeling? You know, like the most everyday things, the stuff we take for granted, could turn into something terrifying.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I got from Mosquito, this short story by Mario Bumer we're diving into. No aliens, no zombies, just pure, stark terror rooted in the ordinary, in this case, mosquitoes.
And Boomer really nails that feeling of normalcy, that false sense of security right from the start.
Oh, yeah.
We're plunged right into the thick of it. Laredo, Texas, a sweltering June night. Two women, Gwen and another we never really get to know, are just trying to get some sleep.
It's so relatable.
It is. The heat, the buzzing, that almost desperate swatting at the mosquitoes. Anyone who's ever been kept awake on a hot summer night knows that feeling. But almost casually, Burmer drops this clue that something's off about these mosquitoes.
It's subtle but effective.
Yeah, like when Gwen finds a dead mosquito on her face, it's described as too small.
Ooh, that's creepy.
Right. It's like a crack in the picture frame of everyday life. And that's where the real horror starts to unfold. Slowly, insidiously.
And it's not just the bites.
No, it's more than that. When Gwen gets bitten, it's more than just an itchy bump. Her eye starts burning, her vision blurs as the night goes on. Brimmer doesn't hold back on those sensory details either.
No, he doesn't.
You're right there with Gwen, feeling that creeping dread as her sight starts to fade. It goes from a bad reaction to, oh God, something is seriously wrong.
It's a fear that gets under your skin, for sure.
Absolutely. And then Broomer widens the lens, so to speak. We're introduced to Dr. Bendler. He's this expert on toxins, epidemics, the works. And suddenly, we're not just dealing with Gwen's terrifying experience. This is a nationwide and quickly becomes a global outbreak.
Talk about a jump. It's like going from a personal nightmare to, bam, a global pandemic in the blink of an eye.
Right. And that's the genius of Broomer's storytelling. He takes that complacency, that it can't happen here mentality and just shatters it.
Yeah.
1 minute, you're sympathizing with Gwen's itchy bite. The next, you're facing down a threat to humanity itself.
And the enemy is so small, so easily dismissed, until it's not, right? That's what gets me.
Oh, yeah. The story reveals that these mosquitoes, a new species dubbed Mosquito retinico, carry this potent toxin, and it targets the eyes.
It's like something ripped straight from a sci-fi thriller, but with this chilling dose of scientific realism.
Exactly. And you can tell Boomer knows his stuff. He doesn't just throw out they go blind. He hints at the biological mechanism, how the toxin works on a cellular level. It's what makes it so believable, so utterly terrifying.
It's a unique kind of fear, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's not disfigurement, not outright death, but this gradual loss of something we rely on so heavily sight. Just the thought of a world plunged into darkness, the vulnerability. It's chilling.
And you see that fear grip the world in the story. People are scrambling for swimming goggles, anything to shield their eyes.
It's a primal instinct, right?
Yeah, shield the vulnerable spot, try to regain some sense of control in the face of this invisible enemy.
But then Boomer takes it a step further.
He does.
The mosquitoes adapt.
It's like he's saying, yeah, you think you've got this figured out.
Right. Those goggles, that last line of defense, they become useless.
Useless.
The toxin can now be spread just by being near someone who's infected.
Proximity. It's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying, like something out of a nightmare.
And that's where the social commentary really kicks in. Broomer isn't just weaving a tale about a physical threat.
Yo.
He's exploring the potential for utter chaos.
Right.
The breakdown of society in the face of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah, and you see that start to unfold in Gwen's story, right? Injured, trapped in her own home, she becomes this symbol of that vulnerability.
It's the terrifying reality of being at the mercy of an unseen enemy, an enemy that can strike anytime, anywhere.
And we'll pick up on that thread and more when we come back. So we left off talking about Gwen, trapped, alone, the world outside her door literally going blind. It's a bleak image.
It really is. But Burmer doesn't just leave us there in that darkness. He shifts the focus back to Dr. Bendler, who's dealing with this pandemic on a global scale.
And he's not immune to the fear himself, right?
No, not at all. He's human, just like everyone else. But he represents that drive, that spark of hope to find a solution, even when things seem utterly hopeless.
It's that contrast, isn't it? Gwen's shrinking world, the very personal terror she's facing, juxtaposed with this global crisis unfolding through Dr. Bendler's eyes.
And it speaks to a larger point Boomer's making about societal breakdown, how quickly things unravel when fear takes hold. Remember that line about the goggles?
Oh yeah. The world went blind long before the mosquitoes finished the job. That one really stuck with me.
It's about more than just physical sight, isn't it?
Way more. It's that loss of vision in a larger sense. Losing sight of our humanity, our capacity for empathy, for working together. It's like the virus itself is feeding off that fear, that distrust.
And we see that play out not just in the big picture stuff, but in the smaller, everyday interactions Boomer weaves into the story. People turning on each other, suspicion poisoning every relationship.
It's like the mosquitoes are almost beside the point, right? Like the real horror is what's happening within humanity itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The mosquitoes are just being mosquitoes, following their programming, so to speak. It's the human reaction that tips things over the edge.
It's one of those man is the real monster scenarios, in a way.
Exactly. Boomer isn't letting us off the hook with an easy "it's the mosquitoes" explanation. He's holding up a mirror to our own capacity for darkness, our own potential for self-destruction.
Which makes you wonder, what would you do in that situation? Could you hold on to your humanity when everything around you is falling apart?
It's a tough question, and I think that's what makes Mosquito so compelling. It's not just a scary story, it's a thought experiment. It forces you to confront those uncomfortable truths about human nature.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about how we respond to crises in our own lives, even on a smaller scale. Do we give in to fear? Do we isolate ourselves? Or do we reach out, connect with others, try to find solutions together?
It's a choice, isn't it? And Burmer's not telling us what the right choice is. He's leaving that up to us to decide.
It's that open-endedness that I think makes it stay with you long after you finish the story.
I agree. He plants those seeds of doubt, those what-ifs, and lets them grow in your mind.
Which I have to say is a pretty effective tactic for a horror writer.
For sure. And he uses those scientific details, that realism, to make those what-ifs even more unsettling.
Yeah.
We've talked about the toxin, but even the way he describes the mosquitoes themselves.
They're not mutated monsters, are they?
No, they're just mosquitoes doing what mosquitoes do. But Burmer highlights how good they are at it, how they adapt, how they evolve to overcome obstacles.
It's like we spend so much time worrying about the big, obvious threats. But what about the small stuff, the seemingly insignificant?
Just the real horror of mosquito, right? The reminder that the things we often take for granted, the things we dismiss as mere annoyances, can have devastating consequences.
And it's not just the mosquitoes, is it? It's everything. The natural world, the systems we rely on, our own bodies. It's enough to make you paranoid.
It's that fear of the unknown, the unseen forces that shape our lives in ways we can't even begin to comprehend. And sometimes all we can do is hold on and hope for the best.
Which brings us back to Dr. Bendler. He's facing his own mortality, his own brush, with this terrifying unknown.
But he never gives up hope.
It's that quiet resilience, isn't it? That spark that keeps flickering even when everything seems hopeless. You see it in Dr. Bendler, but you also see it in Gwen.
Absolutely. Even trapped and facing the unknown, she never completely gives up. It's a testament to that inner strength, that will to survive, even when the odds are stacked against you.
And it's not just individual resilience either. Boomer sprinkles in these little moments, these acts of kindness and connection, even as the world is falling apart.
Right, like glimmers of light in the darkness, people helping strangers, sharing what little they have left. It reminds you that even in the darkest of times, humanity doesn't completely disappear.
It's like those embers we were talking about, the ones that could rekindle the fire if we're careful. And that makes me think about what we can take away from all of this. What does Mosquito ultimately tell us about ourselves?
Well, on one hand, it's a bit of a reality check. It reminds us how quickly things can change, how vulnerable we are to the forces of nature, even the seemingly small and insignificant ones.
We like to think we're in control, don't we? But then something like this comes along and just upends everything.
Exactly. It forces us to confront our own mortality, the fragility of the world we've built.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? There's also this underlying message of hope, of resilience.
Definitely. Boomer doesn't offer easy answers, but he does suggest that even in the face of unimaginable challenges, even when everything seems lost, there's still a spark of something, a will to keep going, to rebuild, to find a way forward.
It's that flicker of possibility that keeps us going, wouldn't you say? that even in darkness, there's always a chance for light to emerge.
Absolutely. It's a powerful message and one that resonates deeply, especially in times like these when the world often feels so uncertain.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from Mosquito, isn't it? That even when faced with the unknown, the terrifying, even the seemingly insurmountable, we still have a choice. We can give in to fear, or we can choose hope.
And that choice, that act of choosing hope, even when it feels impossible, that's what makes us human. That's what allows us to keep moving forward, to keep striving for a better future, even when the present feels incredibly bleak.
So the next time you hear that telltale buzz, that high-pitched whine that sends shivers down your spine, think about Mario Broomer's Mosquito. It's more than just a horror story. It's a reflection of ourselves, our fears, our resilience, and our enduring capacity for hope, even in the face of the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the smallest stories can spark the biggest questions. Ever get that feeling? Like the most everyday things, the stuff we take for granted, could turn into something terrifying.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I got from Mosquito, this short story by Mario Boomer we're diving into. No aliens, no zombies, just pure, stark terror rooted in the ordinary. In this case, mosquitoes.
And Boomer really nails that feeling of normalcy, that false sense of security right from the start.
Oh, yeah.
We're plunged right into the thick of it. Laredo, Texas, a sweltering June night. Two women, Gwen and another we never really get to know, are just trying to get some sleep.
It's so relatable.
It is. The heat, the buzzing, that almost desperate swatting at the mosquitoes. Anyone who's ever been kept awake on a hot summer night knows that feeling. But almost casually, Burmer drops this clue that something's off about these mosquitoes.
It's subtle but effective.
Yeah, like when Gwen finds a dead mosquito on her face, it's described as too small.
Ooh, that's creepy.
Right. It's like a crack in the picture frame of everyday life. And that's where the real horror starts to unfold. Slowly, insidiously.
And it's not just the bites.
No, it's more than that. When Gwen gets bitten, it's more than just an itchy bump. Her eye starts burning, her vision blurs as the night goes on. Burmer doesn't hold back on those sensory details either.
No, he doesn't.
You're right there with Gwen, feeling that creeping dread as her sight starts to fade. It goes from a bad reaction to, oh God, something is seriously wrong.
It's a fear that gets under your skin, for sure.
Absolutely. And then Broomer widens the lens, so to speak. We're introduced to Dr. Bendler. He's this expert on toxins, epidemics, the works. And suddenly, we're not just dealing with Gwen's terrifying experience. This is a nationwide and quickly becomes a global outbreak.
Talk about a jump. It's like going from a personal nightmare to, bam, a global pandemic in the blink of an eye.
Right. And that's the genius of Broomer's storytelling. He takes that complacency, that it can't happen here mentality and just shatters it.
Yeah.
1 minute, you're sympathizing with Gwen's itchy bite. The next, you're facing down a threat to humanity itself.
And the enemy is so small, so easily dismissed, until it's not, right? That's what gets me.
Oh, yeah. The story reveals that these mosquitoes, a new species dubbed Mosquito retinico, carry this potent toxin, and it targets the eyes.
It's like something ripped straight from a sci-fi thriller, but with this chilling dose of scientific realism.
Exactly. And you can tell Boomer knows his stuff. He doesn't just throw out they go blind. He hints at the biological mechanism, how the toxin works on a cellular level. It's what makes it so believable, so utterly terrifying.
It's a unique kind of fear, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's not disfigurement, not outright death, but this gradual loss of something we rely on so heavily side. Just the thought of a world plunged into darkness, the vulnerability. It's chilling.
And you see that fear grip the world in the story. People are scrambling for swimming goggles, anything to shield their eyes.
It's a primal instinct, right?
Yeah, shield the vulnerable spot, try to regain some sense of control in the face of this invisible enemy.
But then Boomer takes it a step further.
He does.
The mosquitoes adapt.
It's like he's saying, yeah, you think you've got this figured out.
Right. Those goggles, that last line of defense, they become useless.
Useless.
The toxin can now be spread just by being near someone who's infected.
Proximity. It's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying, like something out of a nightmare.
And that's where the social commentary really kicks in. Broomer isn't just weaving a tale about a physical threat.
Yo.
He's exploring the potential for utter chaos.
Right.
The breakdown of society in the face of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah, and you see that start to unfold in Gwen's story, right? Injured, trapped in her own home, she becomes this symbol of that vulnerability.
It's the terrifying reality of being at the mercy of an unseen enemy, an enemy that can strike anytime, anywhere.
And we'll pick up on that thread and more when we come back. So we left off talking about Gwen, trapped, alone, the world outside her door literally going blind. It's a bleak image.
It really is. But Burmer doesn't just leave us there in that darkness. He shifts the focus back to Dr. Bendler, who's dealing with this pandemic on a global scale.
And he's not immune to the fear himself, right?
No, not at all. He's human, just like everyone else. But he represents that drive, that spark of hope to find a solution, even when things seem utterly hopeless.
It's that contrast, isn't it? Gwen's shrinking world, the very personal terror she's facing, juxtaposed with this global crisis unfolding through Dr. Bendler's eyes.
And it speaks to a larger point Burmer's making about societal breakdown, how quickly things unravel when fear takes hold. Remember that line about the goggles?
Oh yeah. The world went blind long before the mosquitoes finished the job. That one really stuck with me.
It's about more than just physical sight, isn't it?
Way more. It's that loss of vision in a larger sense. Losing sight of our humanity, our capacity for empathy, for working together. It's like the virus itself is feeding off that fear, that distrust.
And we see that play out not just in the big picture stuff, but in the smaller, everyday interactions Boomer weaves into the story. People turning on each other, suspicion poisoning every relationship.
It's like the mosquitoes are almost beside the point, right? Like the real horror is what's happening within humanity itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The mosquitoes are just being mosquitoes, following their programming, so to speak. It's the human reaction that tips things over the edge.
It's one of those man is the real monster scenarios, in a way.
Exactly. Boomer isn't letting us off the hook with an easy "it's the mosquitoes" explanation. He's holding up a mirror to our own capacity for darkness, our own potential for self-destruction.
Which makes you wonder, what would you do in that situation? Could you hold on to your humanity when everything around you is falling apart?
It's a tough question, and I think that's what makes Mosquitoes so compelling. It's not just a scary story, it's a thought experiment. It forces you to confront those uncomfortable truths about human nature.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about how we respond to crises in our own lives, even on a smaller scale. Do we give in to fear? Do we isolate ourselves? Or do we reach out, connect with others, try to find solutions together?
It's a choice, isn't it? And Burmer's not telling us what the right choice is. He's leaving that up to us to decide.
It's that open-endedness that I think makes it stay with you long after you finish the story.
I agree. He plants those seeds of doubt, those what-ifs, and lets them grow in your mind.
Which I have to say is a pretty effective tactic for a horror writer.
For sure. And he uses those scientific details, that realism, to make those what-ifs even more unsettling.
Yeah.
We've talked about the toxin, but even the way he describes the mosquitoes themselves.
They're not mutated monsters, are they?
No, they're just mosquitoes doing what mosquitoes do. But Burmer highlights how good they are at it, how they adapt, how they evolve to overcome obstacles.
It's like we spend so much time worrying about the big, obvious threats. But what about the small stuff, the seemingly insignificant?
Just the real horror of mosquito, right? The reminder that the things we often take for granted, the things we dismiss as mere annoyances, can have devastating consequences.
And it's not just the mosquitoes, is it? It's everything. The natural world, the systems we rely on, our own bodies. It's enough to make you paranoid.
It's that fear of the unknown, the unseen forces that shape our lives in ways we can't even begin to comprehend. And sometimes all we can do is hold on and hope for the best.
Which brings us back to Dr. Bendler. He's facing his own mortality, his own brush, with this terrifying unknown.
But he never gives up hope.
It's that quiet resilience, isn't it? That spark that keeps flickering even when everything seems hopeless. You see it in Dr. Bendler, but you also see it in Gwen.
Absolutely. Even trapped and facing the unknown, she never completely gives up. It's a testament to that inner strength, that will to survive, even when the odds are stacked against you.
And it's not just individual resilience either. Boomer sprinkles in these little moments, these acts of kindness and connection, even as the world is falling apart.
Right, like glimmers of light in the darkness, people helping strangers, sharing what little they have left. It reminds you that even in the darkest of times, humanity doesn't completely disappear.
It's like those embers we were talking about, the ones that could rekindle the fire if we're careful. And that makes me think about what we can take away from all of this. What does Mosquito ultimately tell us about ourselves?
Well, on one hand, it's a bit of a reality check. It reminds us how quickly things can change, how vulnerable we are to the forces of nature, even the seemingly small and insignificant ones.
We like to think we're in control, don't we? But then something like this comes along and just upends everything.
Exactly. It forces us to confront our own mortality, the fragility of the world we've built.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? There's also this underlying message of hope, of resilience.
Definitely. Boomer doesn't offer easy answers, but he does suggest that even in the face of unimaginable challenges, even when everything seems lost, there's still a spark of something, a will to keep going, to rebuild, to find a way forward.
It's that flicker of possibility that keeps us going, wouldn't you say? That even in darkness, there's always a chance for light to emerge.
Absolutely. It's a powerful message and one that resonates deeply, especially in times like these when the world often feels so uncertain.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from Mosquito, isn't it? That even when faced with the unknown, the terrifying, even the seemingly insurmountable, we still have a choice. We can give in to fear, or we can choose hope.
And that choice, that act of choosing hope, even when it feels impossible, that's what makes us human. That's what allows us to keep moving forward, to keep striving for a better future, even when the present feels incredibly bleak.
So the next time you hear that telltale buzz, that high-pitched whine that sends shivers down your spine, think about Mario Boomer's Mosquito. It's more than just a horror story. It's a reflection of ourselves, our fears, our resilience, and our enduring capacity for hope, even in the face of the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the smallest stories can spark the biggest questions. All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. Today, we're exploring the works of Mario Boomer. He's an author who doesn't hold back on the feels.
Yeah, he really lays it all out there.
We're diving into a collection of his work, a real mix and match of poems, prose, and these little snippets of reflection.
Kind of reminds me of those diaries you find tucked away in a dusty attic, the ones with all the secrets.
Exactly. And today, we get to peek inside. So one thing that really grabbed my attention was this recurring image, this bouffon, the jester.
Oh, yeah.
He keeps popping up throughout these different pieces, most noticeably in El bufón desde la tumba pide un abrazo. The jester asks for a hug from the grave. Tell me, what do you make of this jester figure? He's playful, but seems heartbroken at the same time.
It's a great question. The bouffon, the jester, it's a really compelling motif that Boomer keeps coming back to. You know, it made me think about the whole wise fool archetype you see in literature throughout history. Someone who might seem foolish on the surface, but actually, they get it. They see the world more clearly than anyone.
Ah, like a disguise, maybe?
Right, exactly. Like a mask he's chosen to wear.
Especially when you consider how open he is in his writing about, well, kind of feeling suffocated by what society expects. Like he's being forced to play a part.
Totally. And it's interesting how he uses the bouffon in Lápida de Cristal, which translates to glass tombstone. In that piece, he uses it to dig into this whole idea of memory, how fragile it is. Brumer describes these memories as delicate as glass, easily broken by time, by the stuff we experience.
And in that same poem, he uses the image of a lápida de cristal, a glass tombstone.
Yeah.
So is he implying that our very memories are like tombs themselves? That's kind of a heavy thought.
It is, and it gets at a bigger theme that runs through a lot of his work. The sense of being alone, of feeling trapped inside his own mind, isolated almost.
Which might explain why he blends prose and poetry together so effortlessly. It creates this rhythm to his writing, a flow that's kind of all over the place, like what I imagine it feels like to be inside someone's head during a moment of intense emotion.
That is such a good observation. His writing style really reflects that, doesn't it? It's almost like he's deliberately trying to show the fragmented, often contradictory nature of just being human.
And wow, he does not shy away from strong emotions. That feeling of loneliness we were just talking about, it practically leaps off the page in some of these pieces.
It's powerful, especially when he talks about feeling vacío y desfasado, which translates to empty and out of sync in his relationships. You really sense this deep longing for genuine connection that just seems to slip through his fingers.
And it's not just personal relationships where he feels this. He takes on societal hypocrisy in sections like Concepto según el ignorante, and it's almost like he's challenging the very fabric of what we consider normal.
Boomer definitely doesn't back down from a good debate. And he's got a knack for making you see things in a new way, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And his take on plagiarism in Literatura que es comprada, instead of getting angry, he seems more dissented.
Yeah.
Disappointed, as if it's a missed opportunity for genuine self-expression.
Yeah, he seems almost heartbroken by it.
Almost like he's saying, look, if you're going to steal, at least steal from the best version of yourself. Don't copy me. Find your own voice.
And that emphasis on authenticity, on discovering your own unique voice, It's key to understanding what Boomer's trying to do with his writing.
Speaking of finding your voice, I was really intrigued by how Boomer uses Spanish in his work. He even incorporates traditional Spanish poetry.
Yeah, it's more than just a stylistic choice, you know? I think Bumer is intentionally weaving together these different cultural influences in a really cool way. It's like he's creating this dialogue between what he's going through personally and this rich literary heritage that he's carrying with him.
It adds this whole other layer to his writing. Makes me want to do a deep dive just on how he uses specific Spanish poetic forms.
Right, me too.
Yeah.
It makes you think, given that Spanish was probably his first language, there's a rawness to how he uses it, a musicality that might get lost when you translate it.
Oh, totally. And that adds to that raw, unfiltered quality in his writing. He doesn't try to sugarcoat anything, just puts it all out there, bare on the page.
Yeah, he holds nothing back. It's like he's inviting us to feel everything right alongside him, you know? No pretense, no filter.
Yeah, and that could be a lot, but it could also be kind of freeing.
Definitely. Cathartic, even.
Speaking of catharsis, I wonder, do you think that's partly why he writes? Like, it's a way to work through these really intense emotions, this sense of isolation, this pressure he feels from society.
It's got to be a part of it, right? There's this vulnerability in his words, especially when he talks about his family, like that passage about his segunda madre, his stepmother, and how she siempre ha menospreciado a la mujer, always looked down on women.
Yeah, that one was tough to read.
Mm-hmm.
Made me think about how the things society expects of us can seep into families, Like, it's inescapable.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder how growing up in that kind of environment shaped the way Bumer sees himself, you know? His art, his place in the world.
Especially because he calls himself the ignorante. That's a loaded word for sure.
Mm.
But he seems to be taking it back, making it into something powerful.
Right, he's flipping the script. Like he's saying true wisdom comes from realizing how much you don't know, being open to uncertainty, to new ideas, even if those ideas challenge everything you thought you knew.
Which maybe explains why he's so drawn to, like, smashing these contrasting ideas together. Like, he'll talk about feeling like a arbol sin rayaces, a tree without roots. But at the same time, he's clearly longing for connection. It's like he's acknowledging both the yearning and the struggle.
And that struggle plays out in how he writes, too. He'll go from these incredibly personal, raw, honest pieces. You feel like you're in his head, and then, bam, a moment of sharp wit, almost dark humor. It's like he's using humor to shield himself.
Like, he can't help but poke fun at his own pain a little.
Totally. He's a master of finding humor in unexpected places. And that's another layer I love about his work. He can be writing about really deep stuff 1 minute. I'm thinking of Formas seguras de perder el amor de ignorante, which means like sure ways to lose the ignorant one's love, and the next. He's dissecting these huge societal issues.
He zooms in, he zooms out, personal, then societal.
That's
Like
how.
they're two sides of the same coin, which I guess in a way they are.
Yeah, totally. And the way he does that with language, brilliant. Like in Lápida de Cristal, there's this line where he's talking about how people would atravesaban con sus ojos, they'd look through his loved ones, but never truly see them.
Man, that's such a short phrase, but it hits you right in the gut.
Right. You can practically feel how much he wants to be seen and to be understood, not just superficially, but on a soul level.
Exactly. And that's what makes his writing so captivating. He gets these complicated, messy human emotions down on paper, and he does it with this precision.
For sure. I bet most of us have felt that way, like we're not being fully seen. But how many of us can actually put it into words the way that Boomer does?
It makes you wonder, though, why identify as the ignorante, the ignorant one, if he seems to get people so well?
Maybe that's how he finds peace. By admitting he doesn't have all the answers, by staying curious, by always being willing to learn, that takes humility.
So instead of pretending to have it all figured out, he's cool with saying, I don't know, and being open to what comes next.
Exactly. And in today's world where everyone's supposed to have an opinion about everything, that's a really powerful message, don't you think?
It's incredibly refreshing. It's like he's giving us permission to slow down, ask questions, to say, hey, I don't know, and that's okay.
And maybe even laugh a little about it. Because, let's be real for a second, we've all got a little ignoranti in us, right?
100%.
Yeah.
We've all got our blind spots, our biases, things we're still trying to figure out. And Brummer's work reminds us that it's human. It's fine.
It's more than fine. It's where the magic happens. It's in those moments of ignorancia, of not knowing that we open ourselves up to something new.
New possibilities.
Yeah.
New ways of seeing the world, of seeing ourselves.
It's such a powerful message. And I think it's something that anyone who's ever felt like they don't quite fit in can relate to.
Because I mean, we're all just figuring this whole life thing out as we go, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all kind of ignorantes in a way.
Trying to find our way, trying to make sense of it all.
It's like he's giving us permission to say, it's okay to not have all the answers, to embrace the unknown.
Absolutely. And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, especially in a world where we're constantly being told to project this image of like having it all together.
It's exhausting, and it can stifle creativity, I think.
100%. It's like you're so busy trying to fit into some mold that you never really let yourself explore who you are, what you want to say.
And the way you want to say it.
Exactly. Like with Brumer and his use of Spanish, he could have easily just written everything in a more accessible language,
Yeah.
but he chose to weave his heritage, his native tongue, into the very fabric of his work. It's powerful.
It makes it more personal, too, like you're getting a glimpse into his soul.
Absolutely. And it's not just about showcasing his background. It's about infusing his writing with a different kind of energy, a different rhythm, a different musicality that you just wouldn't get otherwise.
Speaking of different, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? For a guy who calls himself the ignorant one, Brumer seems to have a lot of insightful things to say about life.
There you go again, pointing out those paradoxes. I swear, this guy thrives on them. The wise fool, right? The court jester, who's the only one who can tell the king the truth. Because they're not playing the same game. They're not bound by the same rules.
It's like that saying, the fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool.
Shakespeare. See? You're picking up on it.
Ah, maybe we're all getting a little wiser just by spending time with Brumer's work.
Now you're getting it. But seriously, maybe that's what Brumer's trying to do, Shake things up, make us question everything we thought we knew, see the world through a different lens.
And do it with, brutal honesty.
Yeah.
But also humor.
Always. He never lets us forget that life is, kind of absurd.
Yeah, and that it's okay to laugh about it.
Exactly. He's not afraid to laugh at himself, at the absurdity of it all. And I think that's such a valuable lesson because sometimes you just got to find the humor in the darkness. It's what keeps us going.
For sure. It's like he's reminding us that even when things are tough, even when we're struggling, there's still room for joy, for connection, for a good laugh.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that brings us back to why I think this deep dive has been so impactful. It's not just about, dissecting Brumer's writing style or psychoanalyzing the guy.
Thank goodness.
It's about recognizing that at the core of it all, Brumer is just human, like us. And he's brave enough to put all of that, the good, the bad, the messy out there for the world to see.
And in doing so, he gives us permission to do the same.
Exactly.
To embrace our own complexities, our own contradictions, to find beauty in the imperfect.
To find freedom in not having all the answers.
To be the ignoranti, because that's where the real growth happens.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Mario Brumer, I want to leave you with this thought. What if, instead of chasing perfection, instead of trying to force everything to make sense, we just embrace the unknown?
What if we approached life, our relationships, our passions, our struggles, with a sense of curiosity, sense of wonder?
What if we gave ourselves permission to be a little more ignorante? Who knows what we might discover? Ready for a chilling deep dive. We're headed to Mexico City this time, and let me tell you, you might want to keep the lights on for this one.
Oh, this one's good. Really gets under your skin.
No kidding. We're talking about silencio y quietud, which means silence and quietude. Not your typical ghost story, though, is it?
No, not at all. It's more insidious. It sneaks up on you. It's like the story itself is haunted by this sense of wrongness,
Totally. So we meet Hector, a total numbers guy, an accountant living in Mexico City, loves his routine. And he's got this Maltese Greeno, right?
Right, Greeno. And you get the feeling Hector likes things predictable, just like his little routine with his dog, and then bam, it all gets turned upside down.
Yeah, it's subtle at first. Like, Hector's heard these stories, right, from this former neighbor about the apartment building being haunted.
Yeah. But does he believe them? Not really.
Not really, no. But then one night, late, he's working, and he hears it. This child screaming, screeching tires, car horns blaring.
And it's not just a one-time thing, right? It happens again. And again.
Always after it rains, too, like clockwork. And it's not just him either. He notices a neighbor's light flick on, like they heard it too.
See, that's where the doubt starts to creep in for Hector. He's a logical guy, likes things to make sense, but this doesn't fit. The repetition, those specific sounds, It eats at him.
And then comes Karen.
Karen, moving into the apartment upstairs, the one that's been empty forever.
And at first, Hector's probably thinking, okay, maybe it is just me. Maybe I'm losing it.
Because that's what you do, right? You question yourself before you question reality.
Exactly. But then he finds out Karen's hearing the same terrifying noises.
And suddenly, he's not alone anymore. Someone else is hearing it too.
But it gets worse.
Oh, it gets much worse.
Karen tells him that before all that other stuff, the screaming, the car, she hears something else, a kid complaining about his parents, like just normal kid stuff, right? Except it's coming from inside her apartment.
That's when things get really unsettling.
Yeah.
Like really, really unsettling.
See, that's what I find so creepy about it. It's not like supernatural,
No.
just a normal kid arguing with his parents, stuff that happens every day.
Exactly. It's
I know.
like the mundane turned menacing.
And then, get this, they decide to wait for it.
Ooh, Hector and Karen.
Hector and Karen. They stay up in her apartment, waiting for those sounds to start again.
I don't know if I'd be that brave. I'd be running for the hills.
Right, but maybe that's what makes them want to figure it out,
Yeah.
like confronting the fear head on.
There's that human curiosity, right? That need to know, even when it's scary.
And you know what? The sounds do come back, just like they thought.
No.
The child's voice, upset, saying he's going to run away,
Yeah.
and then footsteps, a door slamming.
Why?
Just awful. But here's where it gets really strange.
Stranger. How?
It's Greeno, Hector's dog. He starts acting weird.
Weird how?
Well, remember, he's usually terrified to be alone, right? But now Hector keeps finding him shut in his office,
Yeah.
like by choice.
Mm.
Just chilling there, totally unafraid.
Right.
And then he tries to bite Hector.
Bite him. Greeno, his own dog.
Yeah, like he's possessed or something. It's like the fear. It's not even coming from them anymore,
It's like it's shifted to the dog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even Hector, Mr. Logic and Reason, even he has to admit that something is definitely wrong. I mean, you got to hand it to Hector for trying to make sense of it all, right?
Right.
Even when it's terrifying.
Oh, totally. He's like the voice of reason in this spiral of crazy.
But even reason has its limits. It all gets to be too much, the fear, the weirdness, for both of them. So they move out.
What? Just like that?
Yeah, pretty much. Crash at a hotel, then find new places separately.
Wow.
And here's where it gets interesting. While they're trying to process everything, they find out about this accident years ago.
In the building.
What kind of
A
accident?
kid hit by a car after a fight with his parents, ran away. No! Makes you think, right? Is that what they were hearing? Like some kind of echo?
It's definitely a possibility, a tragic one, but
Well, the story mentions that new tenants, they have unsettling experiences too, even after Hector and Karen leave.
so even if it was the kid, something else is going on too.
Maybe, or maybe it's just knowing, like once you know something bad happened, it changes how you see a place.
It's like that feeling you get in certain places, right? Where you just know something's not right, even if you can't explain it.
Exactly. And isn't it funny how those feelings, those gut instincts, they can be just as powerful as any logical explanation, sometimes even more so.
It makes you wonder what's stronger, right? Our heads or our hearts? Our need to explain things away or just accept that some things we can't explain.
That's the beauty of this story, though, isn't it? It doesn't give us the answers. It leaves us with that question and that feeling.
That sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones that feel the most real, the ones that make us question everything.
And maybe, just maybe, those are the stories we need to hear most of all, the ones that remind us that the world is a strange and wonderful place, full of mysteries we may never solve.
Silencio y quietud, silence and quietude, a story that will stay with you long after the lights are back on. All right, so get ready for a deep dive. And this one is a doozy. We're talking about a story that's like, I don't know, folklore meets What Were They Thinking? It's the story of Stanislaw Petrovich.
Stanislaw Petrovich.
Yeah, this guy was a recluse, and he somehow, and this is the crazy part, managed to build this unbelievably successful farm, like ridiculously successful, on land that was basically, dust.
Basically dust.
And bad vibes. Like, seriously, this story is strange.
Yeah, what gets me right off the bat is the location itself. We're not talking about like some fertile valley in, California or something.
Right.
This is outside of Saltillo, Mexico, a patch of land that has a reputation as an ancient burial ground, which is creepy enough on its own, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then you add in the fact that the story brings in zombies and not just, a passing mention.
Right.
It's a whole thing.
And this was back in 1994, right?
Exactly. Long before zombies were cool.
Bustamante, the author, was ahead of the curve on that one.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve.
Okay, so we've got our spooky location, we've got the zombie thing going on, but what about this Stanislaw character? Who was he?
Yeah, so Stanislaw Petrovich, he's kind of an enigma. He's born in Poland, ends up becoming an American citizen, but then winds up in Mexico living this like total hermit lifestyle. People who knew him, or claimed to know him anyway, talked about his stare, saying it was like he could see through you.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, I get weirded out just thinking about it.
Right.
I wouldn't want to run into this guy in a dark alley, or a well-lit one for that matter.
Yeah, not someone you want to make eye contact with.
But he wasn't just some creepy hermit, was he? Didn't he have, like, this whole other thing going on?
Yeah, he was super into legends and folklore, which, kind of makes sense when you think about the whole zombie thing. But it was more than just a passing interest for him.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, he was convinced that these old stories, they held some deeper truth, that they were all connected somehow.
Like they were all part of some bigger puzzle he was trying to figure out.
Exactly. And he wasn't just trying to, understand them. He wanted to use them, almost like he was looking for a way to unlock their secrets and use them for himself.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So it's not just stories for this guy. It's like he sees them as, I don't know, instruction manuals or something.
Yeah, like ancient blueprints.
So how does this all tie into the farm?
Hmm.
Because that's the heart of this whole thing, right?
Totally. And here's the thing. Nobody could understand how Stanislaw was so successful.
What do you mean?
The land, it was notorious for being totally useless. Nobody
Yeah.
could grow anything on it. But Stanislaw, he comes along and suddenly it's like, boom, this agricultural gold mine, crops, spices, cotton, you name it, it was flourishing.
There's like the opposite of that King Midas thing. Everything he touches turns to, well, not gold, but, you know.
Life, abundance. And that's what really captivated the locals, this unexplained success. They started calling it the miracle of Stanislaw.
The miracle of Stanislaw, huh? Catchy. But you know what happens when people can't explain something, especially when it comes to success?
Oh, yeah, the rumors start flying.
And it's usually not the, oh, he must be a really nice guy kind of rumors.
Right. People were equal parts in awe of Stanislaw's farm and terrified of what might be behind it. There were whispers, stories about people who got too close to the property and just vanished.
Like those farmers we talked about, the ones who were curious about Stanislaw's methods.
Yeah, those guys. Let's just say things didn't exactly end well for them.
It's like something out of a horror movie.
Yeah,
Don't go investigating the mysterious farm, kids. You might not come back.
seriously. But it wasn't just morbid curiosity that drew people to Stanislaw. There were also a lot of people who were, well, desperate. They were struggling, couldn't make ends meet, and here's Stanislaw seemingly thriving effortlessly.
So they're thinking maybe he can give them some work, teach them his secrets, whatever those might be.
Exactly. A chance to turn their luck around.
Ironic, isn't it? This guy's probably using ancient magic to grow his crops, and these farmers are just looking for some good old-fashioned hard work.
It's like a metaphor for something. I just can't put my finger on it. But yeah, the irony isn't lost on me.
So, did he hire them? Share his wisdom, or whatever you want to call it?
Nope. He refused to hire anyone. Insisted on working the land alone. Which, just fueled more suspicion.
Of course it did. It's like he was trying to keep his methods a secret, like some kind of, I don't know, ancient agricultural recipe.
Exactly. And how could one guy, even with, let's say, some extra help, manage a farm that big and that productive? It didn't add up.
Okay, so we've got the recipe for disaster brewing here. We've got the mysterious recluse, the too-good-to-be-true farm, the whispers of disappearances, and a whole lot of desperate people who are starting to get really, really curious.
Curious, desperate, and some might say a little bit vengeful.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. This is where things take a turn for the worse, isn't it?
Let's just say sometimes it's best to let sleeping zombies lie. And Stanislaw, well, he was about to learn that the hard way.
Okay, so we've got these farmers who are desperate, angry, and they're marching on this creepy, zombie-filled farm in the dead of winter, torches and all.
Oh.
What's Stanislaw doing during all of this? Did he even try to stop them?
Well, that's the thing. He doesn't. And that's what's so eerie about it.
Dunin.
Picture this. Stanislaw's just sitting there on his porch, watching as the flames start to engulf his fields.
He's just watching.
Watching. Doesn't fight back. Doesn't even yell fire. It's like he was expecting it almost.
That's creepy. But, maybe he was just resigned to his fate, like he knew he couldn't stop them.
Maybe. But something tells me this is more than just a bunch of angry farmers with torches. We've got the whole zombie thing hanging over everything, remember?
Right, right. So what happens? Do the zombies just, like, rise up out of the cornfields and attack?
It's actually even more unsettling than that.
Oh, great.
So as the fire's raging, these figures start to emerge, but they're coming from the earth itself.
From the ground. What, like, are they crawling out of graves?
It's more like they're being pulled from the flames, like the fire's giving birth to something monstrous.
That's just wrong.
Yeah, twisted, grotesque figures, nothing like you'd imagine. And they attack viciously.
I'm guessing these are the zombies?
It's the only explanation that makes sense, right? And according to the only guy who made it out of there alive, Enrique, these were definitely zombies, no doubt about it. He said they were strong, had this dead look in their eyes, and the smell, he said the smell was the worst part.
The smell.
That unmistakable stench of decay, classic zombie stuff.
So Stanislaw basically went full-on necromancer, huh? Turns out his fascination with folklore wasn't just a hobby.
It's like he ripped a page right out of one of his books, brought it to life. Which, begs the question, did he plan this all along?
I mean, it's not like anyone just has a zombie army ready to go at a moment's notice.
Right. Remember those buckets of salt? Stanislaw was so careful about keeping off his property.
Yeah, I was wondering about those.
Salt's supposed to repel the undead, disrupt their connection to, this world. Seems like our guy Stanislaw was a bit more prepared for this whole thing than he let on.
So he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Except, with zombies. But what about this Enrique guy? The one who survived.
Yeah.
Did anyone believe his story?
Nope, not a chance.
Really?
They just wrote him off as some traumatized kid who'd lost his mind. He ends up institutionalized his story, just another creepy tale that nobody believes. But here's the thing.
What's that?
The rumors, they persisted. People still talked about seeing figures working the fields at night, figures that moved with this unnatural stillness.
It's like that saying where there's smoke.
Exactly. And in this case, the smoke was coming from a fire started by angry farmers, fueled by desperation, and, let's be honest, probably a bit of envy.
Right, right. But if zombies weren't enough, this is where the story takes a whole other weird turn. We've got to talk about this taxum, and what was that about a smell?
Ah, yes, the taxum. This is where things get really interesting, even for someone like Stanislaw, who clearly had a thing for the creepy and unusual.
Okay, you're going to have to explain this one. What the heck is a taxum?
So Stanislaw's holed up in a fancy hotel in Monterey, right, trying to lay low after the whole farm incident.
Probably ordering room service, trying to forget he just unleashed a horde of zombies.
Right, exactly. But something's bothering him. He can't shake this feeling that something's not right, and then it hits him.
What?
The smell. Enrique described this overwhelming stench of decay, and Stanislaw realizes it wasn't just the zombies. It was something else, something far more ancient and far more malevolent.
Okay, now you've got my attention. So what? It's like a super zombie. A
Right.
zombie with extra BO.
No, I'm not a zombie. It's a taxum. Imagine, if you will, the embodiment of pure, focused rage. Like this being fueled by a need for vengeance so powerful it transcends death itself.
So we're talking about a vengeful spirit then. A ghost with a grudge. And it's after Stanislaw. But why?
It all goes back to the farmers, the ones who attacked the farm. Remember, they didn't just disappear. They were consumed by the fire and the zombies.
Right, right. Go on.
Stanislaw, he starts putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
He remembers the look on the leader of that mob, the pure hatred in his eyes, and that's when Stanislaw becomes convinced. This farmer, in his final moments, he became something more, something monstrous. He came back as a taxum.
Okay, now we're talking. Zombies, vengeful spirits, a recluse with a god complex. Where does it go from here?
Well, naturally, Stanislaw decides to fight fire with, well, more fire.
He's not going to fight a spirit with more zombies, is he?
Pretty much. He figured, hey, the taxum's all about vengeance, right? But the zombies, they're just following his orders. So in Stanislaw's mind, that somehow neutralizes the threat.
That's some serious magical logic right there.
It does sound a bit out there when you say it out loud, but then again, this was Stanislaw. He always seemed to be straddling that line between genius and insanity.
So what happened? Did it work?
Well, he gathers his zombie entourage, right? And then he confronts the taxum, and get this, he utters this one phrase like he's trying to placate it. The act of vengeance is the prerogative of the supreme being.
Whoa. Okay, so maybe a little bit more than a little insane.
Yeah, just a tad. And at first, everything goes quiet, like eerily quiet. The taxum doesn't move, and for a second there, Stanislaw thinks, maybe, just maybe, he's actually pulled it off.
He actually reasoned with a vengeful spirit.
Well, about that. Things are rarely that simple, especially when you're dealing with creatures of darkness and centuries-old grudges.
Here we go. So what happens? Does the taxum attack?
What happens next is both stranger and a whole lot more sinister. You see, Stanislaw, in all his infinite wisdom, decides to release the ghouls.
The ghouls, wait, those are the corpse eaters, right?
The one and only. He figures they'll make quick work of the taxum. So they swarm the creature, this horrible mass of claws and teeth. But instead of the bloodbath Stanislaw's expecting, something totally unexpected happens.
Don't tell me the ghouls switch sides.
No, nothing like that. The taxum, it just endures.
Endures.
Like, it's completely unfazed. The ghouls can't hurt it. They back off like they've been pushed back by some invisible force, and the taxum's just left standing there, unharmed. And then it locks eyes with Stanislaw.
Okay, I am not liking where this is going. What could be worse than the ghouls failing and a pissed-off taxum staring you down?
Remember those buckets of salt? The ones Stanislaw was so careful to keep off his property. It turns out the taxum had a similar idea, but on a much larger scale.
Oh, no. You're not suggesting.
Oh, but I am. It all comes down to water, the one thing Stanislaw needed more than anything to keep his little empire of the undead running.
Irrigation system.
Bingo. The lifeblood of his entire operation. And the taxum, in a stroke of absolutely chilling genius, found a way to flood the entire system with salt water.
So Stanislaw basically irrigated his fields of doom with zombie poison.
It was a masterful, if terrifying, bit of manipulation. And as that salt water rained down on the fields, the zombies, those things that had been under Stanislaw's control for so long, they started to stir.
Uh-oh. This is not good.
Their movements became jerky, their eyes, those blank, dead eyes, they flickered like something was waking up inside them.
They're remembering they're dead, aren't they?
The very thing that had made them such obedient servants, while it was breaking down, dissolving the magic, or whatever you want to call it, that was binding them to Stanislaw's will.
So what happens? Do the zombies attack?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got Stanislaw standing in the middle of what is essentially his zombie army on the verge of a mutiny, with this vengeful spirit just chilling in the background. This is like the climax of a horror movie. Right?
Yeah, this is the part where everyone's yelling at the screen.
Exactly. So what happens? Does Stanislaw make a run for it? Try to reason with the taxum?
It's less about running and more like watching something unravel.
What do you mean?
Imagine, like, a house of cards.
Okay.
Built meticulously, perfectly balanced, and then someone just breathes on it the wrong way. Poof! That's Stanislaw's downfall.
So the zombies, they turn on him.
As that salt water keeps coming down, the zombies, they start to.
Yeah.
Remember, it's like they're waking up from a dream.
And not the good kind of dream.
It's definitely not. One of them grabs his arm, another one grabs his leg, and before he knows what's happening, they're hoisting him up into the air.
Oh, man. He really messed with forces he didn't understand, didn't he?
It's like that old saying, playing with fire. But in this case, it's more like playing with zombies and ancient spirits of vengeance.
So what'd they do? Toss him into one of the irrigation ditches?
Nope. They carried him over to this empty grave.
They were just waiting for him, weren't they?
Like it was all part of the plan. And as Stanislaw's struggling, they just dump him in.
Buried alive by his own zombie workforce. Ouch.
It's a rough way to go, but if that wasn't bad enough, remember those ghouls?
The corpse eaters. Oh, no. You're not suggesting...
They were still lurking around, and they were hungry.
This is just getting gruesome.
So Stanislaw's lying there, trapped in this dark, airless grave, and he can hear them getting closer.
Oh, man. That's a nightmare.
Claws scraping against DEET, that awful rancid smell, like something died inside of something else that was already dead.
Brutal. But so what happens next? Stanislaw's dead, he's buried, the zombies are running amok. Who's left to tell this crazy story?
That's the final twist. Remember that water delivery guy? The one who kept Stanislaw's tanks full?
Yeah.
Turns out he wasn't just some random worker. He was the son of that farmer, the one who led the attack on Stanislaw's farm.
You're kidding. The same farmer Stanislaw was convinced came back as a taxum?
The one and only.
This guy, he was playing the long game.
It seems that way. He knew about the salt, knew it would mess with the zombies.
So he gets a job working for the guy who he believes is responsible for his father's death, sabotages the whole operation, and then just walks away.
It's a story about vengeance, ambition, and the dangers of dabbling in things we don't fully understand, all wrapped up in this creepy tale of folklore and horror.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it? Was Stanislaw a victim of his own hubris, or was he just a pawn in some grand cosmic game he never even knew he was playing?
Yeah.
And what about the farm? Does it just stay there? Or does nature eventually reclaim what's hers?
Those are questions for another deep dive, my friend.
That they are. Until next time, listeners, keep it spooky. Okay, so get ready, because today we're diving into some really unsettling stuff. All here is water. It's a first-person account. But it reads more like a confession or even a warning, honestly. It's one of those stories that really gets under your skin, you know?
Yeah.
And it's full of guilt and possible delusion and just a touch of the supernatural.
Yeah, you know what I find so fascinating about this document is that it really gives you this a glimpse into the mind of someone who is wrestling with what they've done. Like you're looking through a window into their justification or their descent into madness.
Yeah. And just to be clear right off the bat, we want to emphasize that this is just one person's account. It's their truth, or at least the truth as they see it. So, as always, you get to decide what you think is real and what's imagined, and just how far someone might go when they think they found some kind of twisted freedom. Now, the document itself is structured like a confession, and it bounces back and forth between the narrator's past and this really dark path that they're on. We learn about their rough childhood, like losing both parents in a car crash, and the narrator actually blames it on, and I'm quoting here, drug abuse and drunk driving.
And that's the kind of early trauma that can really have a lasting impact on someone. Losing your parents so suddenly and violently like that it can completely shape your worldview.
Oh, absolutely. And, not only does the narrator have to deal with this huge loss, but then they're suddenly responsible for taking care of their younger brother, Jimmy, who they say, and this is a quote, had a problem since the day he was born.
The narrator describes Jimmy as having an intellectual disability, but one of the things that we should probably keep in mind as we go through this is whether that's actually accurate or maybe a sign of the narrator's own kind of skewed perception of things.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to figure out how reliable of a narrator this person really is. But one thing I found really interesting is that even as a kid, the narrator seems drawn to death. Like they talk about finding this bizarre sense of peace at the scene of their parents' accident.
You know, a fascination with death, especially for someone who has experienced it firsthand, isn't necessarily abnormal in itself. It could be a way of trying to process something that feels incomprehensible, to try to make sense of a loss that feels too big to handle otherwise.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then things take this really dark turn. The narrator stumbles across this horrific scene, a car crash with two victims inside.
Mm.
And it's the way they describe it, the details they focus on. It's really unsettling. They talk about a mangled woman, money scattered everywhere, tools in the trunk of the wrecked car.
This discovery is really pivotal because it's like a catalyst for everything else that happens. It sets the narrator on this even darker path. I think we have to ask ourselves, what's going through their mind at this point? Is it greed? Is it some kind of warped sense of opportunity? Or is it something much colder, like a detached curiosity that's even more disturbing?
Well, and here's where it gets really, and I mean really unsettling. The narrator goes into detail about what they do next, and it's bone-chilling how calmly they describe such brutality. They use phrases like, didn't feel weird and wasn't scared, wasn't delighted either. That lack of emotion is, well, it's blood-curdling. It sends shivers down my spine.
That emotional detachment that you're picking up on is a major red flag. It suggests this disconnect between their actions and any sort of normal emotional response, almost like they're watching themselves from outside their own body.
And it gets worse. So remember Jimmy, the younger brother. The narrator mentions giving him a sedative almost forcefully right after finding the car crash victims. It's like they're trying to maintain control over their world to keep things from unraveling completely.
That need for control that you're talking about, I think that's a really important point here. You know, their whole life has been basically this lack of control, right? Losing their parents, then having to become Jimmy's caretaker. It's almost like this act of violence, horrific as it is, it might be their way of trying to regain some sense of control over their life, even if it's in this really messed up way.
So they hide the body.
Yeah.
They bury this man out in their barn.
Yeah.
And that's when things start to take this turn toward the supernatural. They start claiming that they're being haunted by the voice of the man they killed. So is this really a haunting, or is this just their guilt manifesting in this really terrifying way?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, are these claims genuine? Are they hallucinations? I mean, the human mind is capable of some pretty incredible things, especially when you're dealing with trauma. And in this case, the weight of murder.
This is what I find so compelling about this whole thing. The narrator keeps mentioning this dripping water. It's like it's always there, always in the background. And then there's this chilling image of Jimmy's face appearing in the barn. It's like their guilt is taking on this physical form,
Yeah, and the psychological concept of projection is something to think about here. Essentially, it's when we take our own unacceptable thoughts or feelings or impulses, and we kind of put them on to someone else. So it's possible that the narrator's guilt, their capacity for violence, it's all coming out in these haunting visions, these auditory hallucinations.
And then there's Jimmy. We can't forget about Jimmy. The way the narrator talks about Jimmy, it becomes really fragmented. It's almost like they're trying to distance themselves from something or someone. What happened in that barn? Is Jimmy even safe?
That's the question that we're left with, right? And the narrator's own words are chilling. They say they haven't searched the place good enough, which, knowing everything else we know, it sends chills down my spine.
Okay, so we've got dripping water, we've got visions of Jimmy's face, and a brother who may or may not be in danger. Then, as if things couldn't get any creepier, the narrator starts seeing even more disturbing things, like a policeman with a slashed throat, and they even mention a whole mass of bodies. It's like their world is collapsing in on itself, completely consumed by these terrifying visions.
This could just be them losing their grip on reality, like their mind is unraveling under the weight of everything they've done. Imagine carrying that kind of secret, that level of guilt. It would be all-consuming, wouldn't it? Poisoning every aspect of their life.
You know, the water, that constant dripping sound, it's practically a character in this story at this point. Almost like a symbol, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Water in so many cultures represents cleansing, purification. But it can also symbolize something a lot more ominous, right? Like drowning, being overwhelmed. In this story, it's like the dripping water is this constant reminder of the narrator's guilt, the sound they can't escape no matter how hard they try.
And through it all, there's this ghostly voice, the one they claim is haunting them, urging them to listen to the blood.
Yeah.
But all they hear is water. It's such a chilling detail.
Which could point to their complete refusal to confront what they've done, to acknowledge the reality of their actions. It's like they're trying to drown out the truth with anything else.
This whole confession, this descent into madness, is truly unsettling. It really makes you think about guilt, the power of the human mind. Where does sanity end and madness begin? It's like their grasp on reality is slipping away with every drop of water they hear, and yet they still haven't looked for Jimmy. They're surrounded by these horrific visions, convinced something awful has happened, but they haven't actually searched the barn. What do you make of that?
It's a detail that really gets under your skin, isn't it? It could be a manifestation of their denial and inability to face the possibility that they've harmed Jimmy too. The thought is just too unbearable. Or it could be something more calculated, a way of delaying the inevitable confrontation with the truth.
And there's another detail that's incredibly eerie. The narrator mentions seeing something hanging in the barn, something they initially dismiss as a dead cow. But as the visions intensify, that image takes on a whole new meaning.
It's almost like a classic horror movie trope, the misdirection, the seemingly innocent detail that later reveals a much darker truth. This dead cow could symbolize the narrator's desperate attempts to rationalize their actions, to explain away the guilt. They're grasping at straws.
Or it could be something far more literal. We're left grappling with the possibility that what they saw wasn't a cow at all.
And that's the genius of this document, the way it leaves us with more questions than answers. It's a chilling exploration of the darkest corners of the human psyche, a stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create within ourselves.
So what's the takeaway here? Is all I hear is water, a horror story, a character study of a broken mind, or commentary on the insidious nature of guilt? It's really up to you to decide.
It certainly challenges us to think about the blurred lines between perception and reality, the lasting impact of trauma, and the unsettling idea that some actions are simply unforgivable.
We'll leave you with this bone-chilling line from the confession, a haunting echo of the narrator's descent into madness. Listen to the blood in your house. Jimmy has none left. Listen to the blood dripping, but all I hear is water. What will you hear?
All right, so we're diving into Axiom, right? And this opening scene, man, it's a grabber.
No kidding. Talk about setting a tone.
Two characters, James and Romero. Right from the jump, you get this sense that things are intense, off.
And in a way that really pulls you in. You want to know more.
Exactly. So we start in James's room. The screenplay says dark walls that make it feel confined, even though it's a large room. Lit candles on a desk. This is not your average teenager's room,
Not unless your average teen is dabbling in some seriously gothic vibes.
Yeah, right. Like you're almost waiting for a vampire to pop out.
Right, but then you've got these details that complicate the picture. He's got these expensive glasses, designer probably.
Oh, yeah, I caught that too.
And then there's the picture he's looking at, his girlfriend, the screenplay tells us.
Mm-hmm.
And the look on his face. Total sorrow.
So you're like, okay, Is he just trying to seem all dark and mysterious? Or is there something more going on beneath the
It
surface?
makes you question those first impressions, right?
Yeah,
Which is so key to a strong opening.
totally. So just when you think you're starting to get a read on James, the music fades out and you start to hear the sound from somewhere else in the house. The script calls it thrashing.
Mm, yeah, that detail always gets me. So creepy.
Right, immediately sets you on edge. And the way the scene moves with James down the hallway, every step bringing him closer to that sound, the tension is killer.
You're practically speed walking alongside him, feeling that urgency build.
Exactly. He finally reaches the source of the sound, the servants' room, and this is where the atmosphere takes another sharp turn. It's got this hospital room feel, which is already kind of unsettling, but then it describes drawers full and it's indistinct items scattered across the floor, mostly pictures. Like, what even is that?
It's such a jarring contrast, that sterile clinical feel, but with this underlying chaos, like something's deeply wrong. It's the perfect setup for our first glimpse of Romero.
Yeah, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. So James walks into this room, and there's Romero. And the screenplay does not hold back. It's like paralyzed from the waist down, right arm's limp, head all bruised up, bad.
Brutal. You instantly know this guy's been through it.
And to make it even more intense, he's trying to load a gun, struggling with it because
Yeah.
of his injuries.
Adds a whole other level, right? You're hit with the physical pain, but then there's this desperation on top of it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
he's trying to survive. And the first thing he says, and it gets me every time, he goes, "Are you alone? Not help, not who are you? Are you alone?"
Man, that says so much. He's terrified. But more than that, it's like he needs to know who to trust. Can he even trust James? We don't even know these characters yet.
Right, like is someone else coming? Is that the fear? And then James, he just says, "Yeah, it's just me."
And he's so calm. That always gets me. You'd think he'd be freaking out seeing this guy like this with a gun.
Totally. So you're already picking up on this weird dynamic between them. James, young as he is, he's the one in control, seemingly.
It makes you wonder about their history, right? What's their relationship? But the scene doesn't give you time to think about it too much because Romero, he starts unraveling.
Oh, yeah. He goes to a dark place fast.
Talking about his wife and kid, both dead. Like he's lost everything.
And then he says this line to James, "Your mother and father will die, you know. You're going to lose everyone, you know."
Man, every time I read this scene, that line just hits me.
It's like a punch to the gut. Is he trying to warn James? Or is it just this bitterness, you know? Like life has beaten him down so much that he has to spread the misery.
I go back and forth on that. Part of me thinks it's a warning. Like
Yeah.
he sees something of himself in James, this darkness maybe, and he's trying to prepare him for the harsh realities of the world.
Right? Like, this is what's coming for you, kid. And just when you think the tension can't get any thicker, the scene does this crazy thing. It cuts to a flash forward.
Oh yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
We see James in a hospital hallway with his dad. Seems like they're getting some bad news from a doctor.
And then, bang, gunshot, out of nowhere.
Talk about a gut punch. What just happened? Is it connected to this scene with Ramiro and the gun? Did James fire that shot? The screenplay doesn't tell you.
And it leaves you reeling. Suddenly, the stakes are so much higher. We're left wondering about James, about what he's capable of.
And we're right back in that room. Ramiro, he's in agony. The pain's getting worse, and he just wants it to stop.
You can feel the desperation radiating off him.
Yeah, it's palpable. He begs James, pleads with him to end his suffering. It's rough. The way the screenplay describes it, you can practically see the tears in James's eyes. He's torn, but he still picks up the gun.
This is the moment, right?
Yeah.
Everything's been leading to this.
And then he does it. He shoots Ramiro.
There's no going back from that.
And you're left with this pit in your stomach trying to figure out what just happened. Was that mercy or was there something else there, you know?
It's the million-dollar question. And the screenplay, it's so smart. It doesn't give you any easy answers. It's all in how you interpret James's actions, his motivations.
And just when you think you're starting to unpack it, Romero, even though he's been shot, he cries out, "What the fuck did you do that for?"
Chills, man, every time.
Throws everything you thought you knew into question.
Exactly. You start to doubt yourself, your interpretation of the whole scene. Did James do the right thing? Was there even a right thing to do in that situation? It's brutal.
And then, like it's straight out of a nightmare, the door swings open, and standing there is James's father.
Talk about an entrance.
He sees Ramiro dead and James with the gun, and I mean, It's pretty clear what's gone down.
The implication is deafening, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, this whole scene, this whole story feels so much bigger.
So much darker, too.
Right, like James is caught in something he might not be able to get out of. Was this orchestrated? We're left to wonder.
And then that last line from the father, as the scene fades to black, he just says, "No one needs to know."
Oh man, that one line, it's like the definition of chilling.
This scene, from start to finish, it's a masterclass in tension. It grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go.
Agreed. It's uncomfortable, it's thought-provoking, and it leaves you wanting more. Which I guess is the sign of a good opening scene, right? It's got you hooked.
Absolutely. And with that, we've come to the end of another deep dive. We hope this conversation has given you some things to think about, maybe even some new ways to look at your own writing.
And who knows, maybe it's even inspired you to check out Axiom for yourself.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, so find us online and keep the discussion going. Until next time, happy writing, and remember, sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers. All right, so you sent over this opening scene from a screenplay, Axiom, it's called. And wow, it's intense. Like right off the bat, we're dropped into this heavy situation, and it doesn't give you any easy answers.
It really doesn't. It's a bold opening. I mean, you're thrown into this dimly lit room.
Yeah.
It even mentions music, but it's vague, right? No specifics about it.
Right.
Just like this pulsing, melancholic. It's all about atmosphere.
Totally. You can practically feel it.
Yeah.
You know, like something's about to happen.
Exactly. You're on edge from the first line. And then we meet James.
Right, James. Okay, so he's described as good-looking, wearing expensive glasses, looking at a photo of his girlfriend, but her expression is sad? I mean, what's the writer doing there?
Well, it's interesting, right? You get the sense of privilege about James right away, his looks, his possessions.
Yeah.
But then there's this sadness already attached to him. It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
It's like a shadow, you know?
Yeah.
Even before anything really happens. And then there's Romero, or rather, we hear him before we see him. Thrashing, struggling. It's kind of creepy, actually.
It is. It's like something out of a horror movie. And when we finally do see him,
Yeah.
the writer doesn't hold back. Paralyzed, bruised, he's desperately trying to load a gun. It's brutal.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is. And then his dialogue, right, he's
Yeah.
angry, telling James to leave him alone, but there's this weariness in his voice, like he's already given up.
You're right. You picked up on that, too, like a kind of defeat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you start to see the real difference between James and Romero. James, at least on the surface, he's almost naive.
Yeah, like he's trying to make light of the situation.
Right. But Romero, he's living a nightmare.
And then that's when James does something. Well, unexpected. He takes the gun.
Big turning point.
Right. Up until this point, I mean, James seems like this, I don't know, this privileged kid. But that action, it suggests there's more to him. What'd you think? When you first read that, what was going through your head?
Honestly. It's like the writer's playing with our expectations. We're primed to be afraid of the injured guy.
Yeah.
Right. Romero with the gun, with the anger, he seems dangerous.
Yeah, totally.
But then James takes control, or at least tries to.
It shifts the whole dynamic.
Right. And then Romero, he says that line about life, about losing everyone you love, and it's like this punch to the gut. Especially knowing what we know about James in that photo.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. Because now we're seeing what James might be headed for, right?
Oh, interesting.
This glimpse into Romero's pain.
Yeah.
It's like a warning to James, even if he doesn't realize it.
Wow, I didn't even think about it like that. And just when you think you know where this is going, bam,
Yeah.
we're in a hospital hallway.
Flash forward.
Yeah, exactly. We see James, and he's devastated. A doctor's telling him something awful. It's like a punch to the gut.
And it's all connected by that gunshot.
Oh, you're right. We hear it before we're even back in the room with Romero.
That single sound links the past and the future.
It's so effective. Like you're bracing yourself for what's about to happen.
Exactly. And when we are back in that room, everything's different. We know what's coming.
We do, and it makes Romero's pain even more, I don't know, raw.
It does. He's blown off his own hand. He's desperate.
Yeah.
And he's begging James for help.
It's awful.
It is. And this is where the writer really puts us in a tough spot.
How so?
Because is this assisted suicide or is it something darker? It's not clear cut.
You're right. It's like, what would you do in that situation?
Exactly. And the writer makes us face that question right alongside James.
And he picks up the gun again.
He does. But that tiny detail, the fact that he closes his eyes first,
Yeah.
that tells us everything. This is more than just a cold decision. It's
Wow.
emotional, desperate, and we're right there with him. And the screenplay, it keeps you on edge. James, he shoots Romero in the shoulder, and Romero's line is just, "What the fuck did you do that for?"
Oh, man. Yeah, I remember that.
It's like this moment of, did he actually want to die?
No.
Or is this something else?
It's awful because now James is stuck. Right. There's no going back.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the way the writer describes it, the gun recoiling, you can practically feel the weight of what James is doing.
Yeah, it's heavy.
And just when you think it can't get any more intense,
Yeah.
James's father walks in.
Whoa. Talk about bad timing.
Right. This whole scene, it goes from this private, desperate thing
Yeah.
to a family secret in a split second.
And his father's line, "No one needs to know." It's chilling. Like, what does that even mean?
Exactly. Is he threatening James?
Right.
Protecting him? Or is it something worse?
It makes you wonder what kind of family this is, right?
It does.
Mhm.
Suddenly, there's this whole other layer to the story. Like, we've only scratched the surface of who these people are.
Right. Okay, so we've got this incredibly tense scene, these complicated characters. Where do you think the writer goes from here? What happens next?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? But that's what makes this opening so effective. The writer doesn't give us all the answers.
They leave us wanting more.
Exactly. We're left to imagine the possibilities. Will James be consumed by guilt? Will he try to justify what he did?
So many questions.
Right. And that brings us to one of the major themes the writer's exploring.
Control.
Control. Think about it. Throughout this scene, the power is constantly shifting.
Oh, okay, yeah. I see what you mean.
First, it seems like Romero is in control.
Hmm.
He's the one with the gun.
Right.
Right. He's calling the shots.
Right.
But then James takes the gun. He makes a choice. A horrible choice, but still.
It's his decision.
Exactly. But even then, his control is driven by desperation, by uncertainty.
He's in over his head.
Yeah. And then the father walks in. And suddenly, he's the one who seems to be in charge.
So they're all trapped in a way.
Exactly. Each character is grappling with this lack of control, this feeling of being stuck.
Romero with his injuries, James with everything.
Exactly. And the father, even though he seems to have the upper hand,
He's stuck with this secret now.
right, so even he isn't truly free.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it's one of the things that makes this scene so compelling. The writer isn't giving us easy answers. They're making us think.
It's like the writer wants us to feel uncomfortable, you know? Like we're not supposed to walk away from this feeling good.
Exactly. It's thought-provoking. It's more than just entertainment, right?
Right.
It's about looking at these really difficult questions, these situations where there are no easy answers.
Mm.
And that brings us to another thing I wanted to touch on. The language.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
actual writing itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the dialogue, it's sparse.
It is, yeah. There's not a lot of like chit-chat, you know?
Exactly. Every word counts.
Mhm.
Like that line from Romero, "You think you're so funny, rich kid, you don't know what life is going to be like."
Yeah.
It's brutal,
It is.
but it tells us so much about him, about his anger, his resentment, and maybe even a little bit of fear, right?
Fear.
Like he's seen things, experienced things that James can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's trying to warn him in a way.
Like, don't end up like me.
Exactly.
And that's the tragedy, isn't it? Because in trying to avoid that kind of pain, that kind of darkness, James runs right into it.
Head first. And we were talking earlier about that flash forward, that quick glimpse into the future
Yeah.
that just emphasizes the weight of James's actions.
It's like whatever happens in that hospital, it's already been set in motion.
And that's what makes this opening so haunting, the inevitability of it all.
Right. Like even if James had made a different choice, would it have even mattered?
That's the question the writer leaves us with. It's almost like Greek tragedy, you know?
Yeah, I get that. Like fate, destiny, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Exactly. And that sense of things being out of our control, which I think is something we can all relate to on some level.
For sure. So as we wrap up here, any final thoughts on Axiom? Anything you're hoping to see as the story unfolds?
Honestly, I just want to know more about these characters.
Same here.
Like, what happens to James after that night?
Heck.
Does he ever tell anyone what happened?
Yeah.
What about his father?
Yeah. What's his deal?
Right. And what about the girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. We only get that quick glimpse of her.
Exactly. We don't even know her name. But something tells me she's going to be important.
I think so, too.
The writer has planted that seed, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm hooked. I need to know what happens next.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Well, that's Axiom, everybody. A screenplay that definitely leaves you with more questions than answers, but in the best way possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time for another look into the world of storytelling.